ahead and hit go live then.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I have. Oh no. Are you sure you weren't in the stream? Not yet. Okay. All right. So hopefully we're looking good.
Do you need me to? Okay, they're all in a meeting.
D-Dub, can you run OBS and Kyle still host?
Yep.
I typically would. I have been, but my computer's not set up yet.
Yep. Let me set. You all let me know when we're up and running. Let me close. Okay, they're all in a.
You are good.
Meeting. All right, I'm gonna mute myself.
All right. Hey, guys. This is Kyle Chandler with the Digital Innovation Team here at JCPS, and we were just razzing our guest, Amber Paul, here with MasteryConnect about maybe finishing a little early, and then we took up all of her time with a technical issue. So we appreciate not only her patience, but those of you out there watching and waiting for us to get the computers all swapped out and up and running. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. Again, I'm Kyle Chandler with the Digital Innovation Team here at JCPS IT. And we've got an awesome session for you right now. We're going to have Miss Amber Paul again with MasteryConnect. She's going to get in, share that product with us and some of the resources that it's got to offer. So how are you this afternoon, Amber?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing much better now. It's good to see you. Thanks for being with us, and you're ready to take off whenever you're good.
Awesome. So I can go ahead and share my screen. I'm used to Zoom, so let me see if I can figure this out.
Absolutely.
All right. Uh-oh.
And whenever you get the share screen option, it should give you little dialog boxes that ask you which screen you want to share, I think.
Yes, my entire screen. There we go. How is it? Can we see?
That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Were you able to see my PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am.
You saw it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, you did not answer me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. I guess were you typing to me in the chat? I'm sorry, that didn't pop up on mine.
No, you're good. All right. So you can see my PowerPoint right now, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We can. I'm sorry, Amber.
All right. Awesome. No, you're totally fine. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be with y'all today. I know that we are beginning a little bit late, but I'm going to try to finish up as soon as possible. If you're joining, as you know, we are just having little 30-minute sessions 3 times. So again, I apologize for the delay, but let's get going. So just so you're aware who's on the other side of the screen, my name is Amber Paul. I've lived all over the country. I most recently have moved to Texas, but I claim Georgia as home. I went to BYU for both my undergrad and my master's, and I predominantly taught 9th grade. I taught geography, I taught AP Human Geography, and then something called Youth in Custody before I went back to school and became an administrator. As you can see, I started moving around a lot, and it just wasn't practical to get a new teaching license in every state the next year, so I decided to take a couple years off, and I looked up MasteryConnect. So that's a little bit about me. I wish that I was with you in person so I could ask you questions. But after speaking with Susan, it sounds like we've got all grade levels represented, and there are a lot of you. So I definitely wish I were there with you today. Just so you can see what we are covering, we are going to discuss MasteryConnect. So I'm going to introduce you to MasteryConnect, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times, but really the purpose behind MasteryConnect is to make sure that we can assess student knowledge in different ways. You know, all of us teach differently. We want to make sure that whatever our teaching strategies are works with, different types of assessment. So that is one. With that said, after we do that, we want to make sure that we can use data to identify exactly what our students are learning. And lastly, we want to be able to take them and target them for whatever interventions they might need. So with that said, here is a traditional teaching model. This is probably something that you've seen before. You can see if I take this and if I stretch it out, we've got the plan, we've got the teach, we've got the practice, we've got assess, we have grade, and we have record. Now, this is probably what I would say that most Americans think we do as teachers. And this takes a lot of time. You know, when this was created, this was still under the same 180 days of school time frame. To move forward a little bit, in the 90s, this plan was created called the Traditional Mastery Learning Model. And basically that is based off of the idea that we have students and they absolutely can learn, but they don't all learn at the same pace, and they don't all learn at the same, just at the same time frame. Some of them need a little bit more help. So if you compare the two, we still have planning and teaching. We are still practicing with our students. We're still delivering assessments. Of course, we're grading and we're jotting down in our grade book or recording it on our program. We're still doing those things, but these things have been added. So you guys know that you are always reteaching, you're reassessing, you're recording, documentation is huge. However, the confines of the school year have not increased, which we're probably all grateful for. But we're still meeting 180 days. The time frame of the school day is still the same, but there's just so much more expected of us, and so much more, honestly, that we know is really good for kids. So with that said, the founders of MasteryConnect noticed that there was a problem, and they said, hey, we know that these things are great for students. We know that students need to be retaught. They need to be reassessed. And of course, we need to document everything. But this takes a lot of time. And if there's two things y'all are, I don't know if you're like me, I feel like there's two things as a teacher I was short on: money and time. So I really appreciate what MasteryConnect did for me as a teacher. The purpose behind MasteryConnect, as I was saying, is to make sure that we're still planning our lessons, we're still teaching. Of course, we want to practice with our students, but we want to make sure that we are doing these things, kind of efficiently. We want to save time so that these other things can be done simultaneously. So MasteryConnect really helps us assess student knowledge. It helps us so that we can grade, we can record, and we can repeat those steps multiple times if needed, while also saving a lot of time, to be really honest with you. So I want you to step back for just a second, and I want you to think, are you a data collector or are you a data user? I'll give you a second. Now, if I'm being totally honest, and if we were in person, I would definitely ask you your feedback on these questions, but I was an exceptional data collector. AP tests at the end of the year, benchmarks, just everything in between. Unit tests, quizzes. I was really good at collecting data. But to be honest with you, lots of the time before I got to actually picking apart the data and using it for remediation, it was obsolete. My students were in the next grade. We had moved on to the next quarter, and I had moved on. I just really was not the best data user. So the purpose, again, with MasteryConnect is you're already doing the work. You're giving the assessments, you're collecting the data. We want to make it so that you are able to utilize that data in a way that will make your life easier, and of course, that will allow you to see exactly what your students are getting and what they aren't by understanding yet. So with that said, I want you to glance up here for just a moment. Now, if you have not used MasteryConnect before, this is what we call a tracker. So this is a tracker It's kind of synonymous with your class roster, and there's a couple of things I really love about this. So on the left-hand side, of course, you can see your students. It's synced with most SIS systems. Up top, we can see our standards. So here I'm pretending that I teach 6th grade math. But what I really like about this is that I can just glance at this, and at first glance, I can say, okay, it appears that as a teacher, I need to work a little bit on seeing exactly, on reteaching a couple of these standards. You can see just by first glance that this is organized into 3 different mastery levels. So you can see mastery, you can see that's the green color, you can see near mastery is our yellow color, and then lastly, you can see remediation. So you can, just by glancing up here, you can see exactly where students are. And I know if I were planning my week that I might want to invest some time in this standard right here, maybe 6 NSC 5 or this next one. But I would want to step back and I would want to do a full group reteach of those 2 standards. Versus some of my other standards, I could quickly just glance up here and I could say, okay, I have 5 minutes at the end of the period. I'm just going to pull aside 5 students. Maybe if I pick on this standard over here, 6 RPA3, I could pull aside my 5 or so kids that are in that yellow near mastery area, because these students just need to be reminded, hey, when you multiply a negative and a negative, it becomes positive, and they can go forward from there and bump up to that next category. So I love just by glancing at this, I can see exactly what my students are understanding and what they aren't understanding so that I can provide any additional remediation, whether on the low end, whether on the high end, and that's something that I really like about this. Now, another way you can look at this is if you were to glance over on the left-hand side, you might be able to see a student that is kind of just struggling across the board. So we've got the student Daryl over here, and it looks like no matter what way you slice it, he's just not doing really great. Now, if I were a teacher of this classroom, I would say, oh yeah, of course, that's because, he's in the process of qualifying for an IEP, but he doesn't quite qualify for those accommodations yet. Or you might know, oh yeah, well that's because he only shows up on Fridays. And that's when I deliver all of my quizzes. So as a teacher, you would definitely know the ins and outs. You would know if there's something going on at home. You would know, just whatever the case might be. Also, I love about this as a teacher, I could look right here and I could see, okay, this standard over here on the right, students are doing awesome. They're doing a fantastic job. So as a teacher, I might know, all right, well, it's time to move on to the next standard. Or I also might know, oh yeah, this is because there's some cross-curricular thing going on with the science department, and I know that they've already covered it there. So that's something that's really nice to look at first glance as well. Now, one little thing I wanted to point out, you'll notice right here, there are these numbers up top in these little grade boxes. That shows you how many assessments have been uploaded to each standard. So it doesn't necessarily mean they've been delivered, but it shows that teacher has uploaded at least one assessment to each standard. So here, on the other end, you might look up here and you might see, okay, well that's awesome, and obviously I am a great teacher. That's what you should think about yourself. But you also might be able to say, well, I've only delivered one assessment. Maybe it wasn't quite rigorous enough. Whatever the case might be. So there's a little bit about that. Now moving forward, if you continue to glance up here, this is another screenshot of a tracker. And really the only thing that has changed is time. So you can see here on the left, it's the same students, it's our same standards. But there are a couple of things I would like for you to notice. So first of all, you'll notice up top that the number, for the most part, of assessments has increased, except for this one straggler over here. But the teacher has at least uploaded more assessments, and we're assuming that the majority of the students have taken some of those assessments. So that's awesome. We can see that there has been huge improvements across students. We can see that with different standards, that our students really seem to be catching on. And I think that says a ton about the teacher. Of course, the students are working hard, but that's something that I really appreciate.
Hey, Amber, real quick, I'm watching the chat and I've got a couple questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
So these may be more geared towards some internal departments, but I'll see if you got any info on this. I wanted to know, how do the teachers access MasteryConnect? Do they create a personal login, or is there one already out there for them? Or?
Good question. And Susan warned me that some of you guys were super excited already and wanting to jump in. So I'm actually not sure if accounts have been created for you at the district level yet. That's definitely a question that Susan Price might be able to answer better than myself. But yes, you would just access it through MasteryConnect.com. And honestly, you could try. So you could put in your work email address, and then you could click Forgot Password. And if an account had already been created for you, it would guide you to reset the password. If it hasn't, then you definitely want to contact your administrators and kind of just see what the time frame is, to be honest.
Good deal. So this is brand new, very exciting. Someone else asked if you knew if this was associated with Infinite Campus, our student information system.
Your SIS system. Yes, this does have the ability to sync with Infinite Canvas. And I will say it depends. I'm looking at my notes to see if you guys are using Clever quite yet.
We are on Clever, yes.
You're on Clever. Okay, awesome. So I will say that this works with Infinite Canvas as soon as the Clever sync is set up. Meaning if you have a student that's in your 4th period and they change into your 5th period, then they will just magically, in the evening, change into your 5th period. And the awesome thing is that all of that data will follow them.
Awesome.
Also, with Clever, I think it's really great that you could potentially have a student, not that this would happen this year, but say they are, doing online through your school or maybe in person. I'm not sure how you're meeting. And then maybe second semester, they are totally 100% homeschooled, or I should say second quarter, but then maybe third quarter, they bounce back into your class. So all of that data that was given to them first quarter would drop off during second quarter when they are homeschooled completely. And then when they come back to the school, all of that data from first quarter would just magically appear back in your tracker as well.
Awesome. Another question they had was whether or not we knew if this interfaced with NWEA Map at all with some of those results.
That's a great question. And to be honest, I don't know enough about that. I do know that if you're using specific standards, whether from your state or from a specific area, that those can be integrated. So instead of having just the typical standards here, we could pull those in, but unfortunately I'm not familiar enough. That might need to be an internal.
Absolutely. And I will say as well, Michelle Hosted with that question, we've got MAP and NWEA on next, so we can ask them.
Oh, awesome.
As well, so it works out great. All right, sorry, Amber, go right ahead.
No, you're great. Thank you. So as I was saying, you can just glance up here as a teacher. And I love that if you have those 5 minutes at the end of the period, instead of just sitting back and waiting for the bell to ring, you can truly be pulling aside students. And in real time, you can pull them aside. You can, I'm not saying you need to deliver a full-on assessment a second time with some of these students. You might just have them write down the answer on a sticky note, plug that information in, and suddenly you are able to watch as your students progress through mastery. So that's what I love. You'll also notice that the student still is not doing well, no matter what we've tried, and same with this standard. So again, this is a situation where if we were the teacher of this class, we would know a little bit more, but we're not. So I just appreciate that you can glance up here easily and see exactly what's going on in your class. So our goal in doing this is really for 3 main purposes. It helps us see exactly what our students are understanding. With that said, it allows us to target our students for whatever intervention they might need. And I think importantly as well, it helps us as teachers back up a second and say, okay, are my students picking up the way that I am teaching? So it looks like for the most part, however I'm teaching, the students are really getting. But however I've delivered this standard, I might need to try a different route. So I really appreciate that it allows us to do all of those things. With that said, typically, so what I should warn you is that this was really just a 30-minute intro section, or I should say just intro to MasteryConnect. And I know since we started late, we don't have much time, but let me show you a little video clip. It's just about a minute long. And then I'll just take a couple of questions and then we'll move on to the next group if that works.
Absolutely.
MasteryConnect is an assessment and curriculum platform for formative and benchmark assessment, curriculum planning, and teacher collaboration. Search, create and launch formative assessments to get immediate feedback about what your students know and don't know, so you can target interventions and adjust instruction in the moment. Easily create benchmarks using item banks, including TEIs, and distribute them to teachers to deliver and score right in the classroom. Set proficiency targets, measure student growth, even incorporate benchmarks into the formative process. Fuel your PLC with collaborative tools like common assessments and comparison reports to gain insight into best practices, learning trends, and instructional approaches. Map your curriculum by adding lesson plans, activities, videos, and other resources aligned to any set of standards, and save time by building on maps year after year. Start visualizing learning and focus on what matters most, improving student outcomes.
All right, awesome. So I had intended to show you guys, let me get out of this full screen. I had intended to show you guys a couple of reports, but I know that due to time, we aren't quite there yet. So what I do want to say is that there will definitely be more professional development opportunities to come. So stay posted. I hope you saw some glimpses in that little video clip of some of the reports. I would say that was one of the biggest game changers for me as a teacher when I used MasteryConnect, and it's something that when I moved to another school that did not have it, it really affected how I taught, and honestly, I was not as effective and I would think as efficient as a teacher. I definitely missed out on that. So stay posted. There's definitely more to come. Kyle, I don't know if there's one or two more questions that I need to answer.
Let's see. We had some of those answered. We had Susan join the chat with us, and she was helping knock some of them down for us as well. So I think we are in good shape in the chat for now.
All right, perfect. Well, that was the end of our first session. So thank you so much for joining us. Always, like I said, wish I could be with you in person, but this is a pretty sweet setup you guys have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
When it works.
Yeah. Always. So, all right, perfect. Well, we will end that session there and then give me the go ahead for the next one.
You go right ahead. It's all you.
All right, let's do it. It's just funny repeating the same thing automatically. I feel like, if there's any stragglers left on here, they're going to know my secrets. So, all right, so welcome everyone to our MasteryConnect little intro session. Let me go ahead and go back where we begin. I'm excited to be with y'all here today. To go ahead and introduce myself, my name is Amber Paul. I have lived all over the country. I grew up in Georgia. I went to school in Utah, but you can see I've really bounced around a lot, and I've most recently landed in Texas. I went to BYU for both my undergrad and my master's, and I predominantly taught ninth grade, which in some Utah schools is in the middle school setting. So I taught geography, I taught AP Human Geography, a little bit of U.S. history, a little bit of everything, government. And then I also taught something called youth in custody. So with that said, I taught for several years, and then I went back to school, became an administrator, and I was an administrator at junior high for 2 years. Now, I know that this is an introduction to MasteryConnect, but I just wanted to say that at the school that I was a teacher at, we used MasteryConnect, and it was a huge game changer for me in my class. I know that lots of times we think, oh goodness, it's one more program, one more thing to learn, but this saved me time, and I know that my students greatly benefited from MasteryConnect. I will say that when I transitioned to being an administrator, I went to another district, and they did not use MasteryConnect, and it was definitely a disservice. So I know that some of you are excited. I hope that all of you become excited. I really, truly feel like you'll come to love it. So with that said, our objectives for today's session is just a couple of things. I want to make sure that you just know what MasteryConnect is. This is an introduction. I want to ensure that you know what it is. I want to show you how MasteryConnect can be used to assess student knowledge in various ways. How that we can use data to see exactly what our students are understanding. And lastly, so that we can take that data and we can actually use it. And we can target our students for appropriate levels of intervention, whatever that might be. So with that said, if we were in person, I would ask you all these questions right now. But this is the traditional teaching model. I'm sure if you glance up here that this is what you probably think that your neighbors, your friends think that we as teachers do. They probably think we plan lessons, we teach, we practice with our students, we give them a test, we stick it in the grade book, we turn the page in the textbook, and we start the next unit. And to be honest, if this is what we did, this takes a lot of time. A lot of time. However, we know that that is not all that we do. So in the 90s, there was this model that was created called the traditional mastery learning model. And basically, it's based on the idea that we as teachers do those things. So we plan lessons, we teach, we practice, and I think that's why most of us join this profession, because we actually like kids and we like, seeing those light bulbs. But we're also delivering assessments, we're grading, we're reporting, and especially now, because we know that all of our students learn at different paces, different levels. We know that home life is different from child to child. We know that there is a lot of reteaching that occurs, lots of reassessing, and of course, we just love to document everything. So you can see, if I compare the first one to the second one, that really there are more things expected of us now as teachers, which is great and which is super helpful for our students because we want them to learn and we want them to progress. But when you measure it up against time, there has been no time added to the school year, no time added to the school day, and for which we are all probably so incredibly grateful. But there's so much more that we need to do, and just not enough time. So the founders of MasteryConnect said, hey, this is a problem, and they were teachers and administrators. I think at the same time they were developing MasteryConnect. And they said, hey, this is really cool, and we should be doing all of these things, but it's not really helpful for me to give an assessment and then not grade it for a couple of days, and then by the time I'm ready to reteach, it just doesn't flow. So they decided to basically come up with this program that enabled us as teachers to do the grading, to do the recording, the reteaching, the reassessing, the reporting, all in real time. So that as a teacher, we can deliver the assessment and automatically we can pull that student aside and say, okay, these are your next steps. So if you see this bottom model, the performance-based mastery learning model, this is based on the idea that we as teachers are still planning, we're still teaching our students, we're still practicing. And like I said, I think those are the things that we really like doing with our students. But these other things, the assessment, the grading, the recording, and then doing those things multiple times, that kind of takes place as we're doing these other things with the intention of saving a lot of time. And I know this is a really awesome teaser and you're like, okay, cool, but how does that really happen? And unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to show you everything today because we only have, a half hour. But there will be more PD to come. So with that said, I want you to think inwardly for just a moment. And I want you to think, are you a data collector or would you say that you are a data user? So I want you to think for just a moment. And if this were me, I would say that I was the best data collector in my classroom. I had benchmarks, I had my weekly quizzes at the end of the week, all sorts of data I was collecting. AP tests, standardized tests through my state, so much collection of data was taking place. To be honest with you, not so much data was used. I just didn't have time. By the time I took all my papers, I graded them, which not saying you should grade your papers at home. But by the time I would actually grade them and then find time to plug in time in my, in my lesson plans to actually reteach my students, we just moved on, and it wasn't a natural flow to reteach. Or the students were in the next year, or we were in the next semester, and it just wasn't a good fit. So I really love that MasteryConnect allows me to see that data instantly, so that same day, if I wanted to, I could provide any interventions that I needed to. So that's something that I really like. Now, I know that you guys, for the most part, are new to MasteryConnect. I want you to glance up here again for just a moment. Now, this is something that we call a tracker within MasteryConnect. But basically, it's synonymous with your class roster. So if you teach the secondary grade levels, you would have, your second period, your third period, your fourth period. They would all be in a different roster. Versus your elementary, you might have a ELA roster, a math roster, a science roster. You get the drill. So you can probably see by just glancing up here that it's pretty organized. So you can see on the left-hand side, you've got your students. And I had a question earlier of, does this sync with Infinite Canvas? And the answer is yes. So through Clever, we sync with your SIS system. So that means if you have a student that maybe I don't know, Nancy is your student for first quarter, and then maybe she leaves for second quarter, and then she comes back third quarter, all of that data from first quarter would drop off during the second quarter and then magically reappear for third quarter. Or just more simply, if they're going from one teacher to another teacher, in the evening when MasteryConnect refreshes, that student would drop and all of the data would follow them from the first period to the second period, or the one teacher to the other. So that's something that I really appreciate. So that's the students on the left, and then you can see the standards up top. So here we have our standards, and just by glancing at those two things, you can also see that we've got lots of color occurring here. So we have 3 different mastery levels. We have green, which shows mastery. We have the yellow, which shows near mastery. And then we also have this red category, which shows remediation. Now I want you to look up here for just a second. And I want you, and I know I can't really get any feedback, but I want you to see if you can notice any trends with students or with standards. I'll give you just a minute to glance at that. All right, so I'm sure that you noticed several things. I'm sure that you noticed that there are some standards that definitely need to be worked on. So a couple examples might be this first standard or one of these standards over here. Now, as a teacher, if we had, if we're planning out our week, before we move on to another standard, we might want to step back for a minute and we might want to focus on that standard 6 RPA 1. And since most students really need some sort of remediation, whether they're just on the bubble or a little bit lower, that's probably something we could provide to our whole entire class. Not saying it would take the whole class period, but we could probably, revisit that with our whole class. Now, on the other hand, I know that for lots of us, there are times when we just have 10 minutes at the end of the period. And rather than struggling to figure out, oh my gosh, what do I figure, how do I fill this time? Because we all know students go crazy with any extra time. You could instead glance up here and you could say, okay, well, something that would be kind of easy for me to knock out is I could look at a standard and I could pull aside all of my students that are in that yellow category. So I could pull aside these 5 or so students, bring them to the back of the class, and since they're at near mastery, they're probably just on the bubble. They probably just need me to remind them, what a reciprocal number is, or, if you multiply 2 negative numbers, it turns positive. And then if you just have them, if you write a question on the board and then you just have them write on a sticky note, suddenly that is your assessment. So we just document it from there, and we can show you next time how to do that. So I love, again, instantly that you're not having to wait for some big daunting time that you have to reteach all of these standards at once. You can kind of just fill those holes as you see them. Now, some other things to mention. You probably noticed that this standard right here, students seem to be doing really well on. I should pause for a second and say that up here, you may have also noticed these little gray boxes with numbers on it. Now, those numbers show that one assessment has been uploaded by the teacher. So it doesn't necessarily mean the student's taken the assessment. For instance, we've got a blank spot right here, so it looks like that student hasn't taken the assessment. But those numbers show that one assessment has been uploaded. So going back to this right here, this standard that's completely in mastery, as a teacher, we might say, oh yeah, that's because I covered that really well. So of course they're gonna all be in mastery. You also might know that it was something that maybe you kind of conquered and divided with another teacher, maybe the science teacher, or some other cross-curricular activity. Or lastly, you might just glance up here and say, yeah, well, I've only delivered one assessment, so maybe it wasn't rigorous enough. Maybe I should go through this, a second time. But there are definitely things that as a teacher, you would know just by glancing up here. Lastly, before we move on, you also probably noticed this student right here, Daryl. It looks like really across the board, he just isn't doing awesome. He did good on that one that everyone else did well on, but not the rest of them. So again, as a teacher, we would know, oh, it's because this kid doesn't come to school very often, or there's a lot going on at home, which definitely could be the case. Or lastly, we could say, yeah, he definitely needs remediation, but he's also in the process of qualifying for an IEP, and we're collecting all of that data right now to make that happen. So those are just some things that as a teacher, I really appreciate about MasteryConnect, that I could pull this open and instantly see how all of my students are doing without having to shuffle through a worksheet and trying to remember which question went to what standard, because here it's all filtered for me. So that was a little bit about this tracker. Now let's pretend that this is the same group of students, because it is, the same standards. Ultimately, the only thing that has passed is time. So look at this for a second and see if you can notice any trends, any changes. All right. So as you've noticed, you can probably tell that there is a lot more green. There's definitely a lot more mastery. These students seem to be doing exceptional, to be honest with you. If this were my class, I would be quite proud. So it looks like the teacher's been working really hard. Obviously, the students have been learning a ton and have progressed quite a lot. Some changes that I can see, and some more trends to pick out, are you can notice these little numbers up top in the gray boxes. They have definitely increased for the most part in the number of assessments that have been delivered. Now, maybe in your class, your students might not take every assessment. For instance, if I were to pull aside some of these students, I would probably not reassess the students that are in mastery, because it looks like after 5 assessments, they've mastered it. So there are some of these, I'm sure, that the teacher is just meeting with small groups. And again, I use the example of an exit ticket or a sticky note. But they're probably just writing down a problem or two on a sticky note. The teacher's grading it and keeping track. So this shows progress over time, and it really shows where they left off in terms of mastery. So I really think that's worth mentioning. You can see that Daryl still isn't doing great, which is something that, it's a red flag. It's something we should be aware of as a teacher. And we can also see that this standard right here still only has 1 assessment attached to it. So again, the teacher would know, oh yeah, it's because they really get it. Or again, it might be something that we might want to look back on. So again, I really like how much we can see just by looking at this. Now to move forward, this is what we call the ITS model. So I, identify, T, target, S, self-evaluate. So it helps us identify levels of understanding. So to glance back here, if this were my class, I could look and I could see instantly, well, it looks like so-and-so, like Rufina right here, she understands everything except for this first standard. So if for some reason she was hanging out in my classroom after school, I could, bring that up and discuss that with her. So we can see exactly what our students are understanding. And not only that, but at what level. Next up, it helps us target students for appropriate interventions. So yet again, we could provide targeted interventions for specific students just by glancing at this. And then lastly, and I think this is really, really great, that as a teacher, it helps us evaluate how our own teaching is going. As a teacher, I would look at this and I would say, well, it really looks like, for the most part, my students are understanding the way that I am teaching them. But for whatever reason, we're just not getting it done right here on this standard 6 NSC 5. So maybe I should go down the hall and see how someone else is teaching it, or maybe I should just try again. But for some reason, we just aren't quite clicking there. So that's something that I very much appreciate about this. All right, Kyle, do I have any questions before I go on?
Let's see here. They were asking, does MasteryConnect allow us to look at data in a variety of ways? So I guess they're referencing the one view that you had where you were showing us the standards in a class and the students. Are there other, I guess, views or ways to group things that you can use in that program?
Yeah, there are. Let me show you. So what I'm going to do now, and of course, you guys don't have accounts set up quite yet, but I'm just going to go into one of my classes just to show you. So once you get logged on to Facebook, in the upcoming days or weeks or whatever the time frame might be, this is, did I say Facebook? Did I say MasteryConnect? I don't know. But one thing I always say is that this kind of reminds me of Facebook. So if your summer was spent doing a little more Facebooking than MasteryConnect, which mine might have been, then you're kind of already familiar. So you can see your profile picture. Here we've got our news feed. So people that I'm following, in this case, it might be people on my team. I can see things that they're posting. But when I want to look at my tracker, I just go to my trackers tab. And again, there's more professional development coming, so I don't expect you to remember this. But basically, I can just access one of my trackers. And this is what it would look like. So I know that all schools are different. For instance, my school has a benchmark. So this benchmark is how it's kind of in a different spot. But yes, there are some different ways that you can see. So this was kind of just the overview, and I can hide those benchmarks so that they don't flutter about. So this is how you saw it before. So this was just a screenshot of the overall view. But lots of times as a teacher, you want to know more than just, oh yeah, what did they do on a standard? You want to see, the specific assessments. So yes, all you do is you click into the and here you can see some things. So it looks like I uploaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 assessments. And some of them I didn't assess the whole class. And clearly this was kind of just a practice. I need to go back and do some more. But yeah, you can see this in a variety of ways. So I can see the practice here. I can see, a rubric that I gave. I can see a short quiz. And then one thing that I think is my favorite about this is that there are tons of reports. And I know you're probably like, okay, calm down, lady. Like, this isn't, you don't have to get that excited, but reports are game changers because you do not have to take time to compile them. So here, it's broken down to a question. You can see how every student did on a specific question. And you can even click into it and see who got the questions right and who got them wrong. So I really like that. And there's some other reports right here that are really helpful as well. Like if you want to compare how your third period did to your second period, if you had multiple periods, you could compare here. Or if you're mentoring a teacher down the hall, or even just meeting with them in a PLC, and you delivered a common assessment, you could see right here how, clearly I need a little bit of help from another teacher. But you can see right there. And then my favorite report of all, and this is just a teaser because I know we're not quite there yet, but this is my favorite report because as a teacher, you guys know all the time, you get the all calls at the end of the day, or maybe you're asked to be a gen ed teacher in an IEP. And I know as a teacher personally, I would frantically go through my pass back papers, hoping that I had some example of student work. And here, it's all how for you. So for this student, Janelle, I can see every single assessment that she's taken this year in my class. And if a parent is saying, okay, but how did they do on this? Then I can just pull it up and I could show them my screen. I could say, Janelle, do you remember taking this post-test? And she'd be like, yeah. And I would say, okay, well, in the class, it looks like for the most part, students did pretty well. Like here's an item analysis of the class. And then I can look at hers, and obviously this is an example that she did all right in some regards. So there we go. So I just love all of this that is at my fingertips. As a teacher, as an administrator, no matter what role you play, I think this is really one of my favorite things. Okay, any other questions before I show you a short little video clip?
We've just had a lot of interest in access to the presentation that you had for after the session. If you thought that was something you might be able to share with us, I can work on posting that up for the team later so they can go back and kind of get their feet wet a little bit.
Oh, awesome. Do you mean the actual PowerPoint links?
Yeah.
Or a recorded video?
No, just the slide deck that you've been running off of.
Yeah, I can send a version of it over to Susan, and then she could push that out. Definitely.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Last little thing I'm going to show is just a little video clip. Again, it's just a little teaser video.
MasteryConnect is an assessment and curriculum platform for formative and benchmark assessment, curriculum planning, and teacher collaboration. Search, create, and launch formative assessments to get immediate feedback about what your students know and don't know, so you can target interventions and adjust instruction in the moment. Easily create benchmarks using item banks, including TEIs, and distribute them to teachers to deliver and score right in the classroom. Set proficiency targets, measure student growth, even incorporate benchmarks into the form process. Fuel your PLC with collaborative tools like common assessments and comparison reports to gain insight into best practices, learning trends, and instructional approaches. Map your curriculum by adding lesson plans, activities, videos, and other resources aligned to any set of standards, and save time by building on maps year after year. Start visualizing learning and focus on what matters most, improving student outcomes.
All right. There we go. So thank you guys again for joining us. We have a minute or two left if there's any other questions. And if not, then there will definitely be more PD to come.
Yeah, just more. Again, I think we touched on some of them in the last session about whether or not it would tie into our student information system Infinite Campus or Clever or MAP. So just some internal questions we'll work on getting answered for our folks out there. Things about where they would log in. Again, we'll work on getting that info out to them as well. And so those of you that are watching, we had Miss Susan Price join us, and she was answering some questions in that chat as well. And she mentioned that it is currently on the agenda for board approval. And so some of that is we're just kind of happy to have Amber with us to give you an introduction to the tools and how powerful this product will be for us. But we're not able to hop in just yet until we get that taken care of. So just want to let everybody know. Thank you for your patience. And then also Amber will work on getting that presentation to Susan, who can then post on the link after the session today. So you're doing great, Amber. Thank you. You're right on time, like a well-oiled machine. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys again for joining. Like we mentioned, there will be more professional development to come, which we're really excited about. As soon as that board approval takes place. So thank you for joining, and we will start back over in another minute.
Absolutely. And those of you that, if you're joining us again here on the live version of this, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. When you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get notifications whenever there are new videos posted or when we go live. By the way, we break all of these up. We try to do them within a couple of days, if not the evening of a live session, and get them uploaded so you have the power of pause at home. If you're not doing so already, also please join us on Twitter. Follow the hashtag JCPSDigIn and the Digital Innovation Twitter account. We'd love to see you there. And again, big shout out to those in the background running the channel and to all of you. We get over 5,000 subscribers today. So thanks for being with us. And we appreciate your attention and your patience sometimes when we experience those technical hiccups. But with that said, I'll turn it back over to you, Amber, and you can hop back into that third session if you're ready.
All right, let's do it. Let me scroll back on up to the very top. All right. You sound like a well-oiled machine over there. You sound like you should be I don't know if a newscaster or a YouTuber or what, but
Well, we like to joke about possibly radio, but they told me I didn't have the face for TV. So
Lies. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our third round of just a brief introduction to MasteryConnect. Just to introduce myself so you know who is on the other side of the screen. My name is Amber Paul. I have lived all over the country, not in the great state of Kentucky, unfortunately. But I grew up in Georgia. That's where I claim as home, quote unquote. But I most recently have moved to Texas. So you can see I've bounced around a lot. I went to Brigham Young University for both my undergrad and my master's, and I predominantly taught 9th grade, a little bit of 7th, a little bit of 8th, but mostly 9th grade. So I taught geography, I taught AP Human Geography, I taught in DC for a little bit, I taught government and DC history there, which is not helpful at all. But, well, for me, not living in DC anymore. And then I taught something called youth in custody, and I taught predominantly out of middle school, even though I did teach 9th grade. I then went back to school, became an administrator. I was an administrator for a couple of years before, as you can see, I really just started moving around a lot, and it's not easy to change teaching licenses every single year when you live somewhere new. So I decided to take a few years off, focus with family, but I actually used MasteryConnect in my class. I loved it. It made my life easier. My students performed better. And so I am pretty passionate about the ins and outs of MasteryConnect. So with that said, I wish I were with you so I could actually see your faces. Well, half of your faces, probably with masks on. I wish that we were, just all together and that we're a little more normal. But obviously it's not. So with that said, these are our objectives. So really, I'm just giving you a teaser of MasteryConnect. So all that means is that I just want to show you a few things that MasteryConnect can do. And really our purpose, and you'll hear this at least one or two more times, is that I want to make sure that you know that using MasteryConnect, you could assess student knowledge in multiple ways. Unfortunately, we won't have time to pick that apart all the way, but it's definitely possible. With that said, after that's conducted, you can use the data to see exactly where your students are in terms of understanding. And then lastly, it's all about providing appropriate interventions, because that's how we're able to bump them up to that next level. So with that said, if you glance up here, I'm sure that all of you have seen something similar to this before. This is what we call the traditional teaching model. And if you polled anyone on the street, they would probably say that teachers do something similar to this. They would say, oh yeah, we plan lessons, we teach our students, we practice with them, we write down some examples, we give them a worksheet, whatever the case might be. We deliver an assessment, we stick it in the grade book, we turn the page and we move on to the next chapter, the next unit. Now, that's not true for many, many reasons. I mean, we do some of those things, but of course we do so much more. We also know that this takes a lot of time as a teacher. We only have 180 days, and this takes a lot of time. So in the 90s, there was this model called the traditional mastery learning model, which is based under the assumption that students need those things that we just mentioned, but they also need reteaching. They need reassessing, and of course we need to document everything. And this is great for students. Our students do need to be retaught, just how we can take driving tests multiple times or standardized tests multiple times, like you might have taken the GRE multiple times. Students learn at different paces and might need a little bit of extra attention, a little bit more time. So as you can see, if you compare the first to the second, that there is a lot more required in the second, and of course that takes a lot more time, but as we all know that we are still in school for 180 days, the same amount of time every day, and we're all so grateful that that's not anymore. Maybe I should have joked about that. But yes, so we have this compared to time, and we know that those second things will be great for students. We don't necessarily have any more time to conduct those interventions. So the founders of MasteryConnect were also teachers and administrators, and they came up with the idea of something called performance-based mastery learning. And this is based on the idea that we are still planning lessons, we are still teaching our students, we are still practicing with our students, And that's probably why all of us entered the teaching profession. But the hope is that we are able to do these other things. So the assessing, the grading, the recording, and then yet again, reteaching, reassessing, recording yet again, that we're able to do those things simultaneously. So that lots of time is able to be saved, and we're able to move forward and make sure that our students really are understanding what we are asking them to learn. So like I said, they created MasteryConnect based on the concept that these things are really important, really essential for student learning, and that we want to make sure that they are, understanding and progressing so that we can continue to move forward. So I want you to think inwardly for a moment. I want you to think, are you a data collector or are you a data user? So again, think, are you a data collector or are you a data user? Now, I would guess that the vast majority of you are probably thinking both. I do both. Some of you might say I'm a little bit better at collecting, but hopefully we're getting to the point where we are able to be data users. Now, with that said, if I'm being totally honest with you, I was exceptional in my class at collecting data. Benchmarks, state testing, standardized tests, unit tests, all of the things I was really good at. But unfortunately, I was not great at actually utilizing the data. Honestly, I just felt like I didn't have enough time. I didn't feel like by the time I got the AP scores back, or by the time I got my benchmarks back, that there was just a nice, easy flow to figuring out what my students had missed, how I needed to reteach them, and actually implementing that. So I was decent at collecting the data, but I was not awesome at using that data. Once we eventually bought into MasteryConnect, I would say I definitely got better at that, but at the beginning, I was not great at it. So what I would like for you to do for just a minute is go ahead and glance up here. Now, I know that the vast majority of you have never seen MasteryConnect before. So just to give you a little intro, this is what we call a tracker. So this is our tracker. For my elementary school teachers, my younger year teachers, you might have a tracker for your math class. You might have a tracker for your ELA class. You might have a tracker for, social studies. You get the picture. For my older years, you would have your first period, your second period, your third period. You would have a tracker for each of those classes. I just say that because some people think that all of the students that you have the whole day and all of the standards are in one place, and that does not have to be the case. So glance up here for just a minute, and I want you to think, how is this organized? So again, how is this organized? All right, you can probably notice on the left, you can see a list of students, which is pretty similar to any type of roster you've ever had before. Up top, you've got your standards, and that's kind of where the differences start. So up top, rather than keeping track of things by assessment, we have standards. I'll show you how you can drill down and actually see the assessments, but this is just a list of the standards. And then we've got this separated by mastery level. So you can see that our green is our mastery. You can see that the yellow symbolizes near mastery. And then you can see that that red category is remediation. So I love that at first glance, you can look up here. And again, this isn't our class. We don't know these students. We don't know what this teacher's done. But we can see, kind of what the next steps might need to be just by glancing up here. I also want to point out these little numbers up top. So these little numbers up top show us how many assessments have been uploaded to the standard. Doesn't mean they've necessarily been delivered. For instance, we've got this blank spot right here. But it shows us how many assessments have been uploaded. Now I want you to think for a minute. If you had 20 minutes, where would you go? Where would you spend your time? As a teacher, I should say. What trends do you notice? All right, now to pick that apart, I would probably say if I had 20, 30 minutes to reteach a class, I would probably start with one of these standards that, there just seems to be a lot of struggle across the board. All students aren't doing well. So if I had time to reteach my whole class, I could just glance up here and I could say, and actually in the account when you hover over it, you can be reminded of the standard. But I would probably do a full group reteach of one of those 2 or 3 standards. Now on the reverse, if you only had 5 or 6 minutes at the end of the period, you could quickly say, okay, well, Hilda, Barbara, Nanny, Christina, and Bertha, you could call them back to the back of the room. You could have a conversation. It might be so simple as, hey, do you guys remember that when you multiply a negative and a negative, it becomes a positive? And they'd be like, oh yeah. And then you could have them work out a problem on a sticky note. You could look at that sticky note. You could say, all right, well, now that they remember that a negative times a negative is a positive, you stick it in the grade book and suddenly these students are bouncing up back to mastery. So I love that instantly you can just see where students are and potentially what levels they're at. These students, these other 2 students, for whatever reason, I'm assuming that they're a lot lower. I'm assuming that they need to know more than when you multiply a negative and a negative, it becomes a positive. They need me to sit down with them and really break things down and start from the beginning. So again, I really love and appreciate that. Some other things that you've probably noticed are this standard right here. It seems like the students are really getting it for whatever reason. And if this were our class, we would be able to think, oh yeah, well that's because I did this cross-curricular thing with the teacher down the hall, and they should definitely get it because they've learned it in 2 places. Or you might just know, oh yeah, well that's because I'm awesome at that standard and they should get it. Or as a teacher, you might think, I've only assessed it 1 time still, so maybe I need to deliver a second assessment just to make sure it was rigorous enough. So those are all things that are great to know. And then lastly, we have the student Daryl. So you've probably noticed that Daryl needs remediation in almost every category except for that one that everyone mastered and then one other one. But just by looking at this, again, this isn't our class, but if it were, we would say, oh yeah, well it's because he only comes to school on Fridays and that's when I give my weekly quiz. Or you could say, oh yeah, well he's in the process of qualifying for an IEP, but it hasn't been created yet, so the accommodations haven't been, divvied out, so we're working on it. Whatever the case might be, there's a problem at home, he's sick, you guys get the drill. So just by glancing at this as a teacher, we can learn so much, not only about, our students, but the standards as well, and where we might want to move next. So with that said, this is another screenshot. Let's pretend that the only thing that has changed is time. So we've got the same group of students, we have the same standards. I want you to look up here for just another minute, and I want you to think of some trends or maybe some next steps that you might want to take. All right, I'm guessing that you noticed a couple of things. I'm guessing you noticed that Daryl is still struggling for whatever reason. I'm also guessing that just by glancing up here, if you were a teacher and if you wanted to provide some full group remediation, you might decide to teach the whole class, reteach the whole class, I should say, 6 NSC 5. It's also interesting that has been retaught 5 times already, potentially. That has 5 assessments that have been uploaded. So I'm not sure if they've all been delivered, if any of them have been delivered besides one, but that's good to know. And then you can also see that all of these numbers, except for this one, have increased. So again, we don't know if the teacher just hasn't gotten to it yet, or if they have decided that the students are at mastery and that they're good to go. So again, just by glancing at this, we can see, pretty impressively, that our students are doing awesome. If this were my class, I would be super impressed because they're doing really great. Obviously, the teacher has invested a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it really seems to be paying off. You can also see with this student, this might be a little red flag that there might be something starting to happen, in their personal life or just something to be aware of. So I really like that we can just look at this and we can look at trends and know, potentially next steps to take. So before we move on, I just want to mention a couple of things. We call this the ITS model. Basically, the I is identifying, T, targeting, and the S is self-evaluating. But this helps us, just by looking at that tracker, we are able to identify levels of understanding. So we can look here and we can see who understands the concepts very well, the students that are at mastery. We can see who is almost there, the students that are near mastery, and of course we can see the students that need additional interventions with remediation. After we've done that, we can target students for appropriate intervention. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but we know that we would reteach the students that are in that yellow area much differently than we would reteach those students that are in that remediation category. And then lastly, and I think this is really huge, but it helps us self-evaluate our own teaching and how our students are learning. So looking at this, if I really have delivered 5 different assessments, then it might be time for me as a teacher to step back, potentially walk down the hall and say, hey, I need some help. How are you covering this and how are your students doing? Or maybe I just need to reflect inward and come up with another idea. But those are things that I think are all really helpful in regards to MasteryConnect. All right, do I have any questions at all before I move on to the next thing?
Yes. We've got some questions asking about, let's see here, it says if you teach, are the standards automatic or do they need to be manually added? Let me see.
That is a great idea. Remind me, and I have this in my notes, I should just lean over and look at it. Are you guys using your state core or common core?
Let's see here. Susan, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say state core, but that's a good question for her. I'm not certain of the answer there.
Okay, awesome. Well, I should say, regardless of the answer, and I can go to my MasteryConnect account. Regardless of the answer, yes, you do not have to build them in personally. They are there for you. So later on, after your accounts have been created, you'll basically create your classroom and you just choose. So whether you're using an Ohio State core, which I guess I could look and see. Let me choose the subject, I guess. I'll just stick with math. But you would just scroll and you could either use the Common Core if that's what you're using. But yes, to answer your question, all of these different cores have already been built within MasteryConnect. So if you happen to be teaching math and you were using the extended standards for math at 12, new learning standards for 2017, or the new learning standards unpacked for 2017, they're all here. Also, if you are setting your core and you're like, oh gosh, they were updated this summer, so now there's some standards from 2020, we can easily update that and plug them all in for you. So you do not ever need to upload all of your own standards.
Awesome. Hey, Amber, I think Susan joined us as well. Hey, Susan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in a second. I've been trying to monitor the chat, so I thought rather than answering so many questions separately, I would just come on and answer. So teachers are asking when we will, when they would have access to MasteryConnect.
Yeah.
That is pending board approval on August 18th. So once that's approved, we are going to roll out a training plan for teachers that will have more in-depth training on how you can use MasteryConnect. We do use our Kentucky state standards, and it's my understanding those are going to be
I don't
uploaded.
know what I was thinking when I said Ohio. We're talking about Kentucky.
Yeah, it's fine. And those will be uploaded into MasteryConnect. So I know there's still some, unanswered questions, but we are, working diligently to get that approved through the board on August 18th. And then, teachers will have more extensive training today. And next week, we really just wanted to provide an overview for everyone to kind of dip your toes in, and then certainly more information to come. I'm actually planning that with MasteryConnect on Friday morning.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for chiming in. That's perfect. Any other questions, or should I show you one more thing?
They had one other question I saw was about whether or not they had to add their own assessments to that tool. I'm not.
So they can use either MasteryConnect has assessments. They also have an assessment bank. or they can upload their own assessments. Is
Okay.
that correct, Amber?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So, yeah, so you'll have access to an item bank, which you can go through and just choose the standard, and you'll have hundreds of options at your fingertips. You can use assessments that other people have created. So what my department and I did is we decided, hey, you're in charge of Unit 1, you're in charge of Unit 2, you're in charge of Unit 3, and we kind of just conquered and divided, and then we shared it that way. Doesn't necessarily mean I made all my assessments. I might have just found them in MasteryConnect. Or the third option is, yeah, if you've got an assessment that you've been using for the last couple of years and you know it's good, you don't need to recreate the wheel. So simply you just upload it into MasteryConnect and you plug in the answer key so that MasteryConnect can grade it and sort it by standard, and you're golden. So you can definitely do all of those things within MasteryConnect. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Something else, and I'm sorry I said Ohio. I had a meeting just before this with a school in Ohio, and losing my mind. But some things that I really appreciate about this, I should mention, are just the reports. So there's lots of features for reports. If I go into one of my trackers, there are a variety of reports, and I know I say this a lot, but these are game changers. I know I lived with lots of teachers at one time, and we were always up late at night, like trying to figure out what we needed to do the next day, or before PLCs, we're always trying to come up with data so that we can compare it and figure out what we need to cover as a department. So I love that you can just click into any of the standards, and you can see all of the assessments. So I can see every assessment that I've given. So that little box probably would have had an 8 in it or so. And then the best part is that I can just hover over any assessment I gave, and without having to do any work beforehand, I can just see exactly how the students did. So this is my class. I can see, on question number 1, it looks like 4 students got it right. Question number 6 students got it right. And I can just click onto these columns and see who did not get it right. So if I'm reteaching for whatever reason, I can choose to do it in a variety of ways. But I love that I can pull this up in my PLC. I also love that if it's a common assessment, I can filter. I guess I can zoom out a little bit, and I can see on this common assessment, how did we all do collectively if we all had delivered that same assessment. For my upper year teachers, I like that you can compare how your first period did compared to your fourth period. And then I also appreciate that we can compare teacher to teacher. So if we're sitting in our PLC on this specific assessment, I can say, okay, it looks like I need to ask. It looks like none of us did great, but I might reach out for help from another teacher and just say, okay, what did you do? Because your students did great at this. And then the last report, and this is a total game changer for me. And not only as a teacher, I would say as instructional coaches, administrators, huge for special ed. But I love that when you click on any student's name, so you can just click on any student, and you can see overall how they did. So you can see every standard that you've covered this school year. And not only that, but you could click into an assessment. And, I just imagine when a parent walked into my class, or when I get the all call at the end of the day, and the following teachers come to the office, I can just bring my computer, or honestly just have the app on my iPhone, or any phone, any smartphone, or any tablet. And I can say, okay, so-and-so, do you remember taking this assessment? And I could show them how people in the class did. And then I could say, all right, this is how you did, did you study, or do whatever follow-up questions I have. So I love that all of this is right before me. And I just feel like as a teacher, walking into a parent meeting that potentially I'm prepared for, maybe I'm not prepared, but I just look so competent. And I am. I have all of the standards right here. And literally, I have every assessment this student has taken in here, right at my fingertips, that I can just show them as examples of student work. So no more frantically looking, through the student pass-back folder, hoping that there's something there, because I've all got it right here in front of me. So these reports, I would say, are definitely game changers for me. Now, one last thing, I know that Susan mentioned this, and I know I mentioned this once or twice at the beginning, so this is definitely just an introduction. So I know you've got tons of questions, and we fully intend to answer all of them with further questions after. But this is just a little snapshot that will show you a little bit more of some capabilities of MasteryConnect.
MasteryConnect is an assessment and curriculum platform for formative and benchmark assessment, curriculum planning, and teacher collaboration. Search, create, launch formative assessments to get immediate feedback about what your students know and don't know, so you can target interventions and adjust instruction in the moment. Easily create benchmarks using item banks, including TEIs, and distribute them to teachers to deliver and score right in the classroom. Set efficiency targets, measure student growth, even incorporate benchmarks into the formative process. Fuel your PLC with collaborative tools like common assessments and comparison reports to gain insight into best practices, learning curves, and instructional approaches. Map your curriculum by adding lesson plans, activities, videos, and other resources aligned to any set of standards, and save time by building on maps year after year. Start visualizing learning and focus on what matters most, improving student outcomes.
All right. So I've said a couple of times before that as a teacher, I truly feel like my life has been made easier just from the use of MasteryConnect. And more importantly, I really think my students have learned more effectively. I think they've learned at higher levels. I think that, by knowing who I need to reteach what, I'm able to be a more strategic teacher, and then my students have definitely benefited. So we are really excited to have y'all on our team. So thank you for being here with us today. There is definitely, as we've mentioned, there's definitely more to come and more that we are excited to introduce to y'all. So thank you again for joining us. I'll stay on another couple minutes if anyone has any questions. And otherwise, we're ending just 2 or 3 minutes early.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's going to be a super powerful tool, and like some of the real world examples you were using. So we also appreciate the fact that you two are a former educator and have quite the breadth of experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see here.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you so much.
They asked about printing reports, and I think someone mentioned that is possible.
Yes, it's possible. Definitely.
Let's see, there was a question for Susan about the assessments mirroring what they experienced during K-Prep. Not sure if that's one where we can answer.
I honestly have not seen their assessments, but I know that the assessment item bank has different forms of assessment. So they all, there's just a variety of assessments, like short answer, multiple choice. So it's not one assessment type.
Okay. All right. Well, Amber, we appreciate you.
I'm still learning as well. So the main message that I want out there is that, it's pending board approval on August 18th, and then we will have in-depth training for teachers.
Awesome. And it is great to see the excitement in the chat. I mean, people.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Awesome.
I wish I were watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 3 screens going at once right now. So
yes, it's a lot. Well, Amber, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again next Thursday. I think I'm moderating again, so we'll see if we can get me lined out between now and then.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, and we're excited to keep working with y'all.
All right, absolutely. Well, guys, if you're just joining us on YouTube land here today on the Digital Learning channel, we've got map and remote testing coming up here shortly. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe there on the Digital Learning channel. We just hit over 5,000 subscribers today, so we appreciate that and your support. We thank you guys for tuning in with us and hanging in there. Lots of great questions and discussion in the chat. Let us know who you are, what school or department you represent, and any questions you may have. We'll try to get to them here. Also, join us on Twitter. Huge PLN there available to you. Follow the hashtag JCPSDigIn, amongst many others, and a great way to connect with other educators here across the state and across the world. So at this time, I think we're going to turn it over to Holly. Are you there with us, Holly?
Oh, so she Yeah, hey, I'm here. My colleague Brian is having trouble joining us though.
Okay. Do you know if it's the link or something else going on?
He just emailed the team. He says it's not recognizing his email.
Hey, he is. I'm actually giving him my email address so that I'm on the phone with him so that he can log in as me.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan. And Holly, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for
You
having
may
us.
have to call me for you to verify.
While we're waiting, I can go ahead and pull up the schedule on Twitter while we're waiting on those people or him to join us. Let me pull up Twitter as well, and
Yes.
we will get started momentarily.
Thank you, DW. And while she's pulling up Twitter for us and the digital learning channel and the schedule, all the resources that you've got for us as your support team at the beginning of NTI 2.0 here, just wanted to remind you that when you subscribe, you get not only notifications whenever we go live, but when we upload videos, because we break these up and we put them into sections so that you can go back and have the power of pause as well. You also get kind of curated video suggestions when you subscribe. So instead of all those cat videos, you might get something on education or ed tech, leadership. So make sure you take advantage of that as well. Go ahead to W if you've got some info to share.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, you can find the schedule on the JCPS NTI website, and that is jcps.me/NTI. You do want to click on the teacher toolkit, and the live virtual learning schedule is at the top. We also have the on-demand videos, so all those videos from last week and this week, we have broken them up into 30 minutes and we have uploaded those to the channel, so you can look for that teacher on demand playlist as well. And at the bottom, there are more resources that you can look at for the core NTI 2.0 digital tools, as well as our curricular and instructional tools. Those videos and resources are linked for you.
Awesome. And it looks like at this time we've got Holly and Brian with NWEA to talk about MAP and remote testing, along with Susan Price from CDLI with us. So Holly, Brian, if you guys are ready, we'll get out of your way and let you take off here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Susan, thanks for having us. I know the teachers out there are on information overload, so the good news about this section is that it's not all new. It's a little different, but it's not all new. And there is no bad news. So we're coming at you with how to map test remotely, and I'm going to let my colleague Brian do most of the heavy lifting here, and I'll be jumping in as part of a demonstration later to work on the student side of things.
Holly, I'll jump off and monitor the chat and help in that way.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you. I'll just be on the chat.
Awesome.
Hold on.
All right. Do I have to do anything to share my screen?
Yeah. Brian, up in the top right-hand corner, there should be 3 dots. And then there should be an option on there for share screen with us. And then you'll get a dialog box asking you to select which one you want to show us. And there I am.
I'm sharing. All right. Good. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about remote testing here. My setup's a little bit different. I haven't used Google Meets in quite this way. So if I'm a little more clumsy than usual, just apologize that in advance. Just a little bit of pre-work here. When you see me do this is me switching programs and switching roles. And later in the demonstration, you're going to see this quite a bit as I jump back and forth between the role of proctor and student. So just to make you aware of what that crazy screen is.
Okay.
So my name is Brian Jones, and I'm in Maplewood, New Jersey. My role is a technical consultant. So really that's primarily to help educators use technology more effectively, especially in this time of change. as regards remote testing, and then of course to reflect back accurately what our partners have to say about the product and the experience, so that we can continuously improve things. It's a real privilege to be a part of NWEA and work with partners such as yourselves. We believe deeply in getting better outcomes for all kids, and I'm always delighted to be able to share in this way. So the agenda, really briefly, we're going to talk about what to expect with remote testing. As Holly alluded to, it's mostly the same, which is great news. There are a few things about framing how you think about the testing experience that are a little bit different, and of course the communication environment in which the test is given is very different. We'll look at some of the tools that we have to provide you to help communicate and some best practices, and then I'll jump in and play the role of both proctor and student. And I'm going to ask Holly also to be a student. So what things are the same? Well, everything about the proctor console is exactly the same. You'll log into the same location and you'll see all of the same things. All the same actions are available, and everything that a student can do within a test is the same. So that's a huge 90+% of everything is unchanged. But what's different is, of course, you're communicating the way that we're communicating now, or something like it, with your students. And one big difference, and we'll talk more about it, is that the students, instead of using the secure testing browser, which you're probably familiar with, is our what we call the lockdown browser, or the secure testing browser. You won't be using that for your remote testing. And we'll talk about why and what in more detail, but just to sort of throw that out there. And the reason for that in brief is that the lockdown browser does just that. It locks the computer down. So when that browser is open, the computer can't be used for any other process but taking the test. And of course, you'll need it for communicating. So that's the reason for that in short. And then, we'll talk about how to frame up your strategies for supporting students in a similar way that you would in person, but of course, from your remote communication environment. We've had a lot of success with remote testing. I think we're getting up to about 500,000 tests now that we believe have been taken remotely, and they've gone very smoothly overall. Because of the high degree of similarity that I've been talking about, the reliability has remained high, and we've also seen increased engagement times. So one of our goals here will be to make sure that you have a sense of how to get the students into the best possible position for success by mitigating things that might go wrong in advance, and having a really good plan. And being flexible with them so that you can accommodate what might be some needs that emerge that might not have been something that you've thought about before. The testing remotely is a little bit different, as we're all learning. Teaching and communicating remotely is quite different. And in that, you're going to really want to communicate clearly with the families and the caregivers as to why one takes MAP growth. And we all know that MAP growth is really a formative test. So we are asking students questions which might be difficult for them at points. And if a parent looks over the shoulder and isn't aware that everybody in the MAP world knows that some of the questions that they'll be asked are questions that we expect them not to be able to answer in service of the notion that we're going to identify the high end of their performance band, can be frustrating or confusing for parents. So it's a really great idea to do that. And also, we don't want families to be tempted to help out their students because the reward for helping your kid might very well be that your kid gets work that's too hard for them to do, because again, we're using this to set the level of what we can expect. So it's important to talk about that and make sure that families understand the nature of the MAP experience really clearly. So around those communications, we have a bunch of preparation tools which we've put together to offer you. The first one we're showing here is the community website. That's the address on the left. I wish I could cut and paste it for all you. I think maybe Holly will throw it in the chat if she can. And I'm going to just switch screens and actually go to the site live here.
Brian, while you're switching screens, and yes, I'll put it in the chat. There's some people are having some difficulty hearing you. If you could just speak up maybe a little bit more.
Oh, really? Okay, sure. So I'll speak more loudly. Sorry
Use
about
your
that.
teacher voice.
All right. So this is the community site. And on the community site, there's a lot of very useful stuff, but what we're going to focus on today is this is the landing page. We're going to go down to the left and remote testing and school closure support materials. And I'll click on that. And here's where we have a real wealth of information that's really specifically regarding remote testing and communicating with families. If you look at the right lane down here, there are a lot of good resources. We have family letters. We have all kinds of guidance for families. There are slide decks, and we'll talk about in more detail what those are. But this is the community site. I just wanted to show it to you quickly. And also down the page, you'll see that there's a video outlining a lot about remote testing, and then all the FAQs with that same content situated in a bit of context, which makes it even more useful. Directions by device for things that might happen. We're going to talk about pop-up window blockers and other little things that we're going to need to know about to have a big successful time with this. So this page is absolutely invaluable, and I recommend highly getting to know what's here to help you be the best communicator that you can be. Let's see, now where do I have to go back to my PowerPoint? It's a little different. Another one is the family testing guidance letter. We've talked a lot about what the importance of communicating effectively with the families is, and this gives you a template that you can use and modify, but a lot of our terminology and verbiage is there so that that's laid out correctly, and you don't have to wonder if it's accurate and so forth. All about where the students are going to have to log in and so forth is laid out really clearly in this, and it's ready for you to adapt to your usage. Another one that is really important, and again, we're going to talk about the difference of using the regular browser or Chrome as compared to the secure testing browser. But one site that I want to just highlight is the check site. And I'm going to actually browse to it right now, and it's just check.nwea.org. And what it does is it actually runs a diagnostic on that individual machine. So mine's running right now, and it looks at the configuration of the machine, the speed of the connection, the path between the computer itself and our servers. Is there a allowed sites list perhaps that's stopping a student from seeing something? Maybe the parents have installed an internet filter in the home, or maybe they're in a library where there's a filter. So this would flag what issues they have, if there are any, with regards to the connection and the readiness of the device itself. As you move down the page, it really goes into a lot of detail. Some of it's quite boring, but what's important about the detail is that if there's anything wrong, at the bottom of the page, the thing to look out for is going to be the bandwidth. Is one where we always want students to have enough bandwidth. Our requirements are pretty modest, but you will see students using hotspots and so forth from time to time that will give them trouble with the bandwidth. And then the last thing here, probably the most important, is this report at the bottom, which is in free text. So if you just click the highlight the report button and copy and paste, then that's an artifact that can be used for technical support agents on the district side, or if they need to reach out to us if there's something that they can't solve. This will give a very complete picture of what's happening with that individual student's device. So this is meant to be used on the device that the student is going to actually test on, and as much as possible using the same connection and everything the same, so that we can really see what's happening with that device. So this is super helpful as far as having confidence about being ready to take the test from the standpoint of your computer being up to the task and everything kind of being ready to go. Also depicted on this page is, and it's available through the community site, is a interactive video, which if the kids, for example, are having trouble with a pop-up blocker, it goes through and by asking questions, allows them to select exactly what computer they're using and exactly how to mitigate those kinds of problems. So it's really really important that everybody be prepared in advance, so that on test day, everyone's in the right frame of mind and there's no worry and no concern. The device readiness and student practice exercise, which is of course also available on Community, really walks through this step by step. It's meant for families and students to do together, or for teachers and students, or just groupings, so that again, we hit every step and everybody's aware of what's going on and how we're going to move forward with doing the test successfully. There's a slide deck for training proctors. I know that you guys already have a lot of experience in proctoring, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the mechanics of proctoring itself. And as I pointed out, it's really happily very much the same process as it's ever been. But there's a proctor slide deck there to train internally, and a pre-test checklist. Again, this is for proctors the same thing. This is what you're going to need to do to make sure that you're ready to proctor successfully. Of course, some of these things might be done by your district, such as create your roster and so forth. But I think that this is it speaks for itself in its clarity. So, best practices. The check resource we talked about, and pop-up blockers, and a word about pop-up blockers. So because we're using the actual common browser and not the secure testing browser, the first time that a student browses to the map test, it's going to pop up a window for them, which would contain the test. And 9 times out of 10, that window will be blocked by the browser. They normally block pop-up windows because those are often advertisements and other things that are not wanted. So there's a process for your browser, very simple, to allow a user to allow a pop-up window. And they'll have to do this one time before they're actually able to take the test. It's going to say, hey, you've had a pop-up blocker. And again, there are procedures outlined for Chrome. It might be possible for your district. I think that's being investigated to manage that particular piece centrally, but it's something I want to call out to your attention. Also, screen resolution errors is another one, where sometimes screens are set to 105 or 107% magnification, and at a certain threshold, our readiness check will flag that. And again, there are plenty of places where you'll be able to find specific instructions as to how to resolve any of those kinds of issues. But those are the big two. And then you're going to want to know what to do a little bit differently if a student accidentally closes their window, or if they have something happen in the household that requires either a pause or a suspension of the test. Just to briefly outline, pause is a 20-minute or less break in the test, and that's what you'd use in a classroom if a student has to use the restroom or so forth. And the partner to pause is resume. And then if something more severe is happening, let's say that the student's having connectivity trouble, or something's happening in the house, or pipe broke, or something's happening that's a big distraction, and you decide to suspend the test, then that means that test will stop in place. And when the student comes to a new test session to take that test anew, you'll choose test again for that student. And then the last thing I just want to hit on is it's a great idea to get your students into their groupings as they would, and invite them to a test session as you normally would, after they've done all these pre-work that we've talked about, and have them get right up to being ready to be confirmed. And I'll show you what that looks like, but I think you probably already have some idea. Not actually confirming them, but right up to the moment of confirmation. And that'll mean that they've crossed all the obstacles, they have beaten the pop-up blocker, they have adequate bandwidth, everything is ready, and they're ready to be confirmed. And that would be the most sort of absolute test that you can do well in advance of test day. So again, when test day comes, everybody knows what they're looking at, everybody feels good, and there's not a lot of distraction about the remote component of testing itself. So a big piece of that is, just having a game plan. How are you going to utilize your communication environment? How are you going to use the mute feature, for example, so that students are either able to be heard? What's the strategy for them notifying you that they need assistance? Are you watching them? Is there bandwidth to support that? Those are the kinds of things I don't want to go into too much detail, but those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to have a game plan for that works. And you probably have some idea of what works because you're conducting a lot of communication with your classes. You're going to want to keep your session sizes as small as you reasonably can. We like to see the test size, session size be around 10, but at the same time, completely understand that your roster may be providing you with larger groups for that. So as an example of a way to adapt to that kind of a need, we recommend a rolling start or some classroom management technique like that. So you have a group of 20 and you wish you had 2 groups of 10. You start the Bears at noon and the Lions at 12:15. And they're both in the same test session, but informally organized into smaller groups. And really that's just, again, so that you can have clear communication, stress-free, and minimal chatter back and forth, and have this test get off to a good start. And the other big difference is you're going to want to be more proactive about using that proctor panel than ever. And again, we'll dig into that in a little more detail, but watching the testing progress or lack of progress will be a big indicator as to whether or not your students are out to a good start, just in terms of accessing the test itself. So, familiarity with your platform. I probably should be more familiar with Meets. It's one thing I'm learning today. Is important because that's really where you are able to interact with your students. And then lastly, we ask that tests are not recorded. I think everybody can understand why that's probably not a great practice. So please don't record the actual test sessions. Also, in the mindset of flexibility, you're going to want to have a game plan about makeup sessions. Expect things to have hiccups, expect people to have little trouble. Don't let that get anyone bent out of shape or upset. Be ready for that and just defer them to the next session that you have available and help them work through what issue they might have. If it's technical, or it might not be technical, it might just be a normal student issue. But be ready for things to be a little bit different. People do get flustered by the mere act of being online, no matter what degree to which the test is actually the same. And be aware that bandwidth may be different from household to household. So some students may have plenty of bandwidth for a beautiful color picture to be broadcast through, and some that may start to tax their bandwidth too much, and you might need to allow those students to be on audio only or even chat only. And again, that comes down to having a strategy for how you're going to allow the communication pattern to utilize the tool most effectively for your students and what they're capable of delivering from a technical standpoint. This is a good moment to just sort of, while I get to the next piece here, Holly, has anybody asked a burning question before I go into demo mode?
Brian, anything that anybody's asked in the chat so far has been addressed, and I'm going to put that community site link in there again for those who maybe joined late.
And then,
Fantastic.
Holly, because this is YouTube, do you mind sending me the link, because it won't let you post that link on the chat, and I can give you my email address.
Sure, of course.
Okay. It is Danielle, DANIELLE .washburn@jefferson.kyschools.us.
And if that gives you fits, Holly, you can kick it to me from earlier. We were chatting, and I'll get it there.
So here I am in the familiar instructor proctor panel. This should look very familiar to you guys if you've used it. I may have a little bit different abilities down here on the left lane because I have a pretty unique type of account. So I have a lot more than you might see as a normal proctor in a normal district. But don't let that fool you. It's exactly the same thing. And today we're really going to focus on managing test sessions. Your district will have already created your roster and your students will have already been added. So for our purposes today, I'm going to use the trusty Test My Class button, which just pulls up as it insinuates all the classes that you are. And today I'm going to use my consultant class. And just like that, I have an actual live test session ready to go, just the same as it ever was. You have the session name and the password, which is generated automatically. A lot of times, I don't know what Chine 6535 means. So at this moment, and this really is a best practice, we might want to make the test session have a more sensible name. So I'm going to end this test session, and which gives me an opportunity to change its name, and I'll just call it Jones 2020. And once I save and exit, now that session can be called back by clicking on my save testing sessions. And it has the sensible name of Jones 2020 and a brand new password. Importantly, each time you close and open a session, it gets a new password. So you won't be able to publish the session name and the password in advance, too far in advance, maybe a few minutes, but not days in advance, because that password is going to change and be unique for each actual testing session event that you have. Just talking a little bit about what the student experience and the proctor experience is. We always are asked about accommodations. It's very important to us. So you can assign accommodations to individual students in the same way that you have, and that all comes out the same for them as an experience by browsing to the site rather than using the secure testing browser. It's simply the same.
And Brian, can I just add to that, because there was a question in the chat about accommodations. And if students have a reader, say for math, then they can have a text-to-speech accommodation assigned to them, since there won't be school personnel to necessarily sit there and sit knee to knee with them. And if that text-to-speech accommodation isn't going to work, then we need to reach out to Susan Price and myself, and we will help you with some other workarounds there.
Great, thank you. And about that, one of the other attributes of a test session that's probably important is which test am I giving? So what I'm going to do first here is I'm going to assign a test. Again, I have a tremendously long list of tests because I have absolutely everything. But we'll just say that we're doing Algebra 1 2017 test today. Doesn't really matter, but the point is that once that test is assigned, I've assigned that to Adam, and let's imagine that we have a mixed class. Oh boy, fly just flew into my face. Sorry. A mixed class of students. I can assign a different test to different students. So this student might see Math 2 to 5, and then I'm going to ask Holly to play the role of Shelly Garcia, and Shelly is going to take also the 2 to 5 test. So she's been assigned that test. So we have 3 students here that have been assigned tests and 2 that have not. If you wanted to assign them all the same test, of course, you can select them all and then assign them all the same test. I think that's probably a more normal scenario. But this session is live, so I'm actually going to go now and sign in as young master Adam Archer. And let's see, so I'm going to go to the test URL that would normally on here.
Hey. Okay.
Wait, connect. That's an important one. Test.mapnwea.org. Now, it's at this juncture that if the student was going to get a pop-up blocker, they would get it, right? So if looking behind these windows, they would normally, this is where they would see a pop-up blocker. And apologies for not having, being able to demonstrate that, but I've had trouble clearing that out of my memory because it is a one-time action. But this is the moment at which they'd be stopped. If they were stopped, they would see a screen that says, oops, where's my test window? And that would immediately point toward resources to solve their issue with the pop-up blocker. So that's, again, that pop-up blocker is kind of the known bugaboo. But from here, it's all the same for students. I sign in, Jones 2020, and my password was 8408. And here I am. So the students can either start to type their name or pick it. I'm going to be Adam Archer. My test is already selected for me. And you'll notice that if I went to Todd Dawson, for whom I did not select the test, they're gonna also be asked, which test are you taking? So Adam today for us. And next, now Adam's ready to confirm. So again, this is a moment for you as a proctor to communicate with the students and make sure that who you think is signing in as whom you believe they are is really happening. And then when I say yes to this, as Adam, I'm all set. I go back to my proctor self and refresh my page, and I see that now I have 2 students, myself, Adam, and also Shelly Garcia, ready to be confirmed. So I can just hit confirm, and it picks those who are ready to be confirmed, and that means that they're off to the races. I'm going to refresh this page again. So already Shelly's out to the races. She's 1 question in, and here's where that question number and the progress becomes really important. The page updates itself every minute, but if you don't want to be as patient as to wait for a minute, you can hit refresh and it'll tell you what's changed. So as you watch Shelly Garcia's progress here, every time I hit it, she's moving pretty fast, right? So she's got already 1 question that we believe is a rapid guess. So as she goes on and I'm watching, oh gosh, up to 10. Now she's been warned 3 times. Okay, so I'm thinking, boy, she's definitely guessing. So I may decide to pause her. And so I'll just take the action of pause. So now she's paused and say, hey, Shelly, and communicate with her again in a separate channel or in a breakout room. There's a lot of options, so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of that. But have a side conversation with her. And once she's all set and I've had an effective conversation with her, I can select her and resume her. Pause and resume are the partners. Right, so my guy, Adam, you'll notice that now when I go back to that, he's ready to enter the test. And there it is. On the sign-in page, you'll also notice, and in some of the resources, there's a practice test that's available. We refer to it lovingly as the GROW test because the username and password are both GROW, G-R-O-W. And this will allow students to select a test that's like the one they're going to take and get familiar with all the tools and the way that it works, the way that it looks, what's on the screen, what's it all about? Do I need to use my highlighter if I'm Adam? Maybe I do, right? So I get to know what these tools actually can do for me and how to use them as a practicing tester prior to test day. And that's, we consider that a really best practice. So again, the students come back and they are ready to take the test in light of the knowledge of how to do it and how it all sort of works. The other thing that might happen is if a student rapid guesses enough and fast enough and hard enough, they'll be paused and you would see this go red. Again, this is the normal operation of the proctor console. And again, in this instance, you would need to communicate if they're paused by the system, you would need to communicate this proctor pin to them. So again, that's one where you might text that to them if they're able to do that, or have a side conversation, or put them in a breakout room, or any number of ways to communicate with them without too much rancor around it. I'm at about 30 minutes of talking, so I think now might be a good chance to open up to some questions here and see if we can surface anything that I might not have been clear enough about, or anything that you still have a question about. No?
The main questions are around accommodations, Brian, and those are outlined in the JCPS map implementation book, which was just refreshed for 2021, and we added an appendix outlining remote testing with these additional remote testing resources. What I don't have is the link to where it is. I know it's on the principal priority page, but I don't know what folder it's located in on Jefferson County's site, and I think Susan Price had to step away. So as soon as we get that link, we'll get it in there for you all.
Great. And while you're talking, Holly, I'm just showing again the accommodations that are available to assign at the point of assignment. But really, the big difference here is to have a frame of mind that is flexible and creative. I've seen a lot of interesting solutions to the problem of having enough bandwidth or even access at all for that matter. Some districts are pulling up trucks into the parking lot with Wi-Fi. Others are having sessions in the gym. Others, everybody has adequate Wi-Fi at home. Others have hotspots, which may or may not really give them enough bandwidth to do everything that's required for both a remote testing session, which has a modest but definite need for a given amount of bandwidth. And of course, in the background, you're running a Google Meet session, which means you're running Chrome, which means you have the camera running. So that the assets that are in use start to add up a little bit. So if a student is having a choppy signal or faulty or bad bandwidth, or you already know that they have bandwidth problems from prior interactions with them, you might suggest that they go video free and use the audio if you can. We also are often asked about academic honesty and issues around that. And I would just say that we haven't had anything happen that we can really notice as NWEA as a big problem with that. One best practice on academic honesty, if that's an issue that you're concerned with, might be to have a simple, very simple little contract that you draw up between the caregivers and yourself as the proctor or the school or the district, and telling them, reminding them what the purpose of the MAP testing is, the nature of that testing, and of course that we promise not to try to Google answers and do things like that. Of course, looking up answers to these kinds of questions in Google, a few things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to be super slow. So you would see that by being an active proctor, because it takes time to look up those questions. And then it's not even effective. It's really, I've tried it. It's very hard to do. So the student who's enterprising enough to do that probably is already very bright, and you know them well to be so. So just have your eyes open for those kinds of things. Nothing new there. Yeah, but that's what it is. It's a success mindset and a flexible mindset that's going to take you the furthest with all these things. And a few best practices: getting your test sessions organized in advance, making sure that the tests are assigned in advance to your sessions, making sure that all the accommodations and all those things are worked out. All of that will combine to have a better remote testing day on actual test day. And of course, doing all these things as far in advance as is practicable is a great idea, so that there's time to react to whatever you might discover in terms of a technical issue or a readiness issue or parents issue, and all those things. Early is everything for this. And then if all that fails, still stay cool and have a backup session ready, and use that as an opportunity to dig in deeper with that particular student or group of students, and find out what's going wrong and give them another shot at it. We found that the remote testing has been very effective, and we're really delighted by how well it's working and helping people continue on with giving the best to their students.
Hey, Brian, I apologize if you covered this. I was distracted by my 4-year-old coworkers momentarily. Did you cover the download session progress button? That's newer and I don't think taken advantage of fully in Jefferson County, and will help with planning for makeup sessions.
Thank you. That's a great call out. I did not cover that. So thank your 4-year-old colleague for catching that for us. This download session progress button, as it appears, if you're going to end a session and folks are not complete yet or finished, and you know that you're going to suspend a test and suspend the session and stop it, this download session progress will do just what it sounds like. It creates a little file, which when we open it up, it tells you exactly where each student is in terms of where they were. So you'll be able to see that some students might have been complete and you don't need them to do the makeup. Some were on question 15, et cetera. This lets you get a little bit of a snapshot of what was happening at the time that you ended the session. So I just did that. And I see Holly's still testing, but I'm going to end it on her anyway. And it's asking, some of the students are actively testing. I'm saying, yep, they're going to be suspended. That's actually what I want to happen. So there we have it. It's asking me one more time, would I like to change the name? I'll keep it the same so that that's easier. But we know that the next time they want to come back to that session, it's going to have a new password because the session's over. So, I mean, those are and you can see that me as Adam Archer, my student, I've been logged out because the session has been stopped. So I go back to login, and I'm waiting now to have a valid session name and ID to continue where I left off on my test. And here's the link to the practice test that I mentioned before. That's really useful, highly recommended. Just again, to build familiarity, overcomes a lot for our kids.
And we were able to post some of those documents that you guys were requesting in the chat from the digital learning channel. So if you guys want to reference the chat to dig into some of those a little deeper. And Brian, absolutely great advice on the practice test. I remember even, being in a building, that was a awesome savior oftentimes to catch any issues before they happen on test day. That's the worst time, so thank you.
Sure, absolutely. I think we have a few more minutes here before.
Oh yeah, you got about 20, sure.
Oh gosh, okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns around the mechanics of giving the remote testing? Because I peeled off about 38 minutes there. So.
Yeah.
Brian, they are asking about the communication platform and how to chat with students during the test. And I know that the digital learning channels offered some trainings on Google Meets. And so your platform will be Google Meet. So you all will be running your Proctor screen and Google Meets kind of simultaneously to communicate one-on-one with students. And we would recommend videos on and microphones off during the time. That way, if there's background noise, which there will be in other people's homes, that's not heard and distracting the other students, but that the teacher can see the student when that's applicable and allowed, to kind of monitor and help with some of the fidelity of the assessment.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. And Google Meets, I know, has a pretty light footprint, so hopefully that'll be a relief for students that bandwidth is always a factor. So Google Meets is pretty light-footed in that way, so you shouldn't have too much problem with a student with an average high-speed internet connection in the home.
There were some questions that looked like whether or not we could get your presentation linked. I don't know if that's something you guys would be able to share or not, but if you are, you can email it to me, Holly, and I can link it to your presentation on the schedule for today. And if not, that's okay, but they were asking about that in the chat as well.
Just the slideshow, just for clarification. Yep.
Right, that's what they were looking for, huh?
Yep, happy to share that. And for those folks, I would also direct them back to that community page, because my part of the presentation, at least, is more bones and less flesh, and the stuff on the community page really has it fleshed out in great detail. So mine is things I'm going to talk about, and then in the community site, those documents actually go into tremendous detail talking about the actual issues that you might only see as headers and talking points on mine. But happy to share that with that in mind.
Great, thank you. We had a question about if we could revisit what happens or how they handle it if they get a pop-up blocker again.
Sure. So let's talk about that. So there are a number of ways, and I'm on my share. That's so different. So I'm right here on the community page that I've been talking about, and here are how do I know if a student device meets the specifications, and then we're gonna look for the pop-up blocker instructions specifically, right? The device readiness check is one, and there's a practice exercise, and in here somewhere is hidden exact directions of what to do with the various pop-up blockers. So this is direct by device I just clicked on. Oops, where's my test window? Is the screen that I described to you. And this is very direct instructions as to how to disable it for Chrome, for Firefox, for Safari. I don't think iPads are an issue, but this is a different take on the same message, that if they're blocked, these are the ways that they're going to do it. And really, it's usually just a couple of clicks to do it. But it's important that be out there and followed. So that's here. How do I know a student's device is ready? Of course, you're going to do the readiness check. You're going to note the system requirements. And if they do have a pop-up, it's right here in the context of meeting readiness. Another thing that, since we have a minute here, another thing that I'll just point out, which I always do, one of the best and most hidden resources is right in plain sight, which is the help inside of the Proctor panel. Our help feature goes into wonderful detail about absolutely everything there ever was to know about MAP. Most of this information remains the same. Again, with the big asterisks that we're reframing our communication environment to one that's remote. All of these things remain pretty much true. Of course, the data, once you get the data out, that's why we're in this game. Some things for parents, which is very, very useful. And all these things are extremely useful on the actual homepage of MAP itself. And let me just get back out to the homepage. When you first come in, quick references are always, it'll take you right into the help for our top asked questions and things like that. And then another thing, this is aware of where you are in your proctoring experience. So if you're on a managed test sessions page, it's already going to be giving you help about that page. If you're in managing users, probably it would give you help about that. So it's context aware, and that's so don't fear having to dig through a giant menu of things. It's really thoughtfully designed to be action oriented.
Awesome. Brian, we've got Mary out there asking, she says, we may have reviewed this already, but since scholars will have NWEA up in Google Meets, will they also be able to open other tabs as well to look up definitions, etc.?
So the answer to that question is yes, they would have that ability. That's the difference between using the secure testing browser, which again precludes all communication or other activity on the device at the time of the test, which would be our in-person recommendation of how to test. But for remote, we know that you're relying on communicating also using the same device in most instances. I've heard tell of people using phones and so forth, but the assumption here is that you're going to be doing this with Google Meets in the background. And so that rules out the secure testing browser and rules in the wild and woolly internet. So it's possible for them to look up things. It's difficult. I think you'll notice by being an active proctor and looking at their progress would be super slow in that instance. And you might, if you have a concern about that, you might consider making an explicit agreement with them or instructing your students and families explicitly as to why that's not a good idea. This test is really about understanding where is your student's zone of proximal development. So if their older brother's standing there answering all the questions, they're going to get harder homework than they would like. That's their reward. So that's an important one to remember.
I think it's also important to reiterate with other teachers and students that it's not for high-stakes decision-making purposes. This is for instructional purposes, and making sure that students understand that teachers need to know their just right readiness level. And it's hard to wrap your head around taking a test where you're going to get 50% of the questions correct and 50% of the questions wrong, but that's the nature of the test design. And so when they start getting to questions that they don't know, they should read the question and try and then move on to the next question without, getting friends help, sisters help, Dr. Google's help, things like that.
That's right. And parents understanding, I know I'm guilty of this as a parent, that my kid never gets 50s. So just watching, it would be hard for me not to say anything. So understanding what the test is about. Half the questions are going to be hard for the student to answer. And we know that that's the nature of it.
All right. Any other gems or tidbits that you'd care to share with us, Brian or Holly? I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat just now.
I'm not seeing any. I did respond to one. They asked what grade levels, and this year, this fall for remote testing, it'll be 3rd grade through 8th grade, and then several high schools have opted in just to get some incoming data on their new kids. And we're going to stay out of K2 for now for a lot of reasons. And in the winter, if we're back in brick and mortar, then we'll revisit that.
Great. Okay. All right, guys. Anybody else out there in YouTube land got any last minute questions you'd like to hit the NWEA team up with? They're here and ready to rock. Okay, she wanted to know if you guys knew or could share the testing windows, if we know what those are just yet. Have they been in contact with you about that, Holly?
Yeah, it's I gotta pull up a calendar though to get it right. It's September 8th through, I want to say October 1st. I think you all are off on the 2nd. So yeah, it's about a month long. You've got a little bit of grace before kids are in front of screens / in buildings, and then you can get up and going with MAP and have up until that. I think you have a Friday off, so it's until then.
Right.
Also in the implementation guide, which Kyle, if you could post that again, just so they can have the link to it again at the bottom of the chat and not have to scroll.
Yes.
That'd be awesome. Everything's in there. We'll also go ahead and add Brian's PowerPoint, a link to it, to that appendix about remote testing, so that you all kind of have a one-stop shop.
Super.
There's that. And then when we get the link to the presentation, we've got a schedule where we keep these links from these events. And so we'll be sure to put that on there for the viewers as well.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody. Good luck with everything. Good luck finding more brain space to learn new things as you go along this journey. And just know that we're right here with you, learning new things too, and happy to support you all in any way that we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I wish you great success with your remote testing in the fall phase.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian Holly, again from NWEA, touching on map testing with us. I am going to see if I can get my screen shared now and talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on over on Twitter. So out here on Twitter, guys, if you've never joined us out there for really the largest PLN you're going to find, if you look for the JCPS Dig In hashtag, you will see that we've got a lot of good stuff going on over there. We have got Whitney Young is so grateful for the distribution team's help. Every time her phone buzzes from the chat room, she feels like an angel gets its wings. The reality is every time my phone buzzes, a Kentucky JCPS family is being served. So that's awesome. So Kinder Stone, we appreciate that. I was hamming it up a bit here earlier. We've got Miss Michelle Diller going to join us, and I argued I was her biggest fan. So she's going to talk to us here around 3 o'clock about the JCPS PLC framework. And there are a few that know that any better than she. So at 3 o'clock, she's going to join us here live. So be sure to tune in for that. At 2, we were talking about how we had the NWEA with us. We were excited to have them here. Marcy Rogers this morning was on Twitter talking about learning G Suite from the wonderful Miss Gray. Lassiter Middle is going back to rock NTI 2.0. So go Lassiter Lions. Little shout out there to them. We've got a Lassiter, he's not quite an alum, but he hails from there. That was his last assignment. Thanking everybody out there on the professional JCPS community for supporting us and leading together here on this very channel. So we had over 5,000 subscribers today. So again, thank you so much, guys. If you have been with us all day these last few days, if you have intentions of being with us in coming days, we really appreciate the support. Don't forget to subscribe. And when you subscribe, it will give you notifications whenever we go live. It'll give you notifications when we upload new videos. And what we do is we go in and break these up, and edit them down a little bit for you. And then we put them into categories, and you've got the power of pause. So you can always go back and say, well, wait a minute, what did they talk about here? And just back it up a little bit, and you've got it. So, and if you subscribe and you get those notifications, it'll also help curate your suggestions a little better. So instead of all those pesky cat videos, you might get some stuff about education and learning on there. So be sure to check that out. I'll drive over there real quick. jcps.me/digital learning. There you are. And then whenever we land on this page for the digital learning channel, you will see that we're currently live, but we've also got tons and tons of videos and playlists. So if you hop over here to the playlist section, you've got NTI 2.0. So far, we have 13 videos that we've got loaded up on there for you. Knowledge gaps, teacher backpack, the 5 basics with Dr. Coleman, Jamboard for interactive whiteboard, breakout rooms in Google Meet. So just so many things that are out there for you guys to check into and take a look at. We've also got on the JCPS jcps.me/NTI website. You can find the teacher, student, and family and community toolkits. If you head into the teacher toolkit, you'll see that you have the complete on-demand playlist, which takes you back over there to the digital learning channel, as well as the live virtual learning schedule. So for the coming weeks, if you take a peek back up this way, you've got the end of this week coming up today. Of course, if you've got your PD hour, it's a Flex PD day tomorrow, so you are welcome to check out the on-demand schedule. But we've got Miss Michelle Dillard, the Assistant Superintendent of Middle Schools, for the PLC framework, and then NTI 2.0 grading procedures with Maddie Shepard and Joe McKim coming up at 3:30. If you want to check out what's coming on next week, the week of August the 17th, just click up there at the top, and you'll see that Monday through Thursday we're jam-packed again. You've got instructional strategies and methods. We've got our own Rebecca Reynolds presenting from the Digital Innovation Team, our newest edition. We've got some familiar faces, Lacey Eccles and Dr. Lynn Reynolds looks like she's going to be on there. Jan Richardson will be with us Monday. That'll be an exciting session right there as well, so be sure to mark your calendars for that. All the way through, again, Thursday, but you've got the whole child on Tuesday and Wednesday and meeting the needs of all learners on Thursday. And then, of course, we're off again. If you have that PD credit, it's a flex day. You can join us and watch some of those videos there. Drew Courtney on Thursday of next week, meeting the needs of English learners. He is a former employee of Moore, where I hail from. Shout out all you Moore Mustangs out there. Rachel Klein, who serves with me on the Miracle Middle School team. She is going to be presenting next Thursday at 2:30. And then Michelle Shorey, who helped support me whenever I was at Moore, with superb screencasts to engage all learners. So she's really a dynamite presenter, and we'll be happy to have her at that time. So again, Miss Dillard should be joining us any moment to hop in and talk to us about the PLC framework for JCPS. Let's hop back over to Twitter and see if we've got anything new happening on the hashtag for us here. We also have a, let's see, where's it at here? The Digital Innovation page that you can join in on and get updates on new products that are launching that you can use for your digital classroom for NTI 2.0 or otherwise. So be on the lookout for updates there. There you go. You've got the Middletown ES staff there. Going to have a Rad Times Appy Hour. That looks pretty exciting. Hey there, DW.
Hey, just thought I'd hop in here and kind of talk with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing wonderful.
Awesome.
I'm hoping I can get my technical issues resolved before next week. I appreciate you hopping on here. For those of you that don't know, we kind of run a program in between here to make things run smooth on YouTube. And I was in a bind, and none other than me, Danielle Washburn, hopped on here to bail me out. I really appreciate her doing that. But we've got a really tight team, so I'm fortunate to get to be a part of it.
You know, it's always about teamwork. We make each other better. So, love enjoying working with this team.
Well, it was awesome. I just sent a message out to our next guest here, and it looks like they may have actually wound up something may have grabbed their attention here. Let me see if I can.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think her slides are linked. However, we can possibly play a video that has been uploaded to the channel.
See if we can find something about that here. And actually, DW, would you mind digging that to me, or digging into that for me for just a moment? And I will join you right back here.
Yeah. So let's hop over to the schedule. And then I'm going to keep my eye on the call to see if she joins us. So we'll be going back and forth at times. So let's take a look at next week. So we do have, oh wow, look at that. That schedule is really packed with a lot of great information. On Monday, the theme is the instructional strategies and methods. We have a great lineup as well. Let me hop back up.
Yeah, actually, DW, I just spoke with Michelle, and she said, I've got that one that we did last week. She said, let's cue that up.
Yeah.
She tried to get tied up, so if we can find that one for her,
Okay.
We'll make sure that they can check it out. Do you want me to try to run it from my end here?
I can run it from my end. I am going to go to the channel. And then, I'm assuming it's called PLC.
Yeah, PLC Framework, and I think she
Here
said
we go.
she last week. Awesome.
Awesome.
All right, guys, well, you're in for a treat. Michelle Dillard is going to be on this episode for you, so we'll let that roll if you missed it last week. And
all right, so thank you so much for having us. We are the Miracle Middle School team. As you can see here, I am Michelle Dillard, the Assistant Superintendent for Middle Schools, and so excited to be here to talk to you about the PLC process, the framework, and share some updates. And you can never get too tired of this, because this PLC framework is like the guide to all of that work that you just previously heard Susan and Suzanne speak about, that will help you get student achievement up.
And I'm Jessica Rosenthal. I'm the Executive Administrator for Middle Schools. You see on here that one of our big sayings is expect miracles. We believe so much in all of our schools in JCPS, and it's such an honor to get to work with so many of our middle schools, and glad that others are able to join us today too, and just spend a little bit of time in our day talking about the PLC framework. I just want to give a shout out to Ms. Dillard too. She is a solution tree consultant, so she is a resident PLC expert, and we're very lucky to have her as a resource. So we're going to jump right in and spend a few minutes with the PLC framework. So how do you find it? This is a perfect lead in from what we just heard Dr. Coleman saying there at the end. You can find it with the teacher backpack. That's the most important thing to remember, that if we're using the teacher backpack, which we should be all the time, this should be the landing page for our teachers and the work that they are doing. The PLC framework is in there. So here are just some specific steps to get to the teacher backpack. If you're getting there for the very first time, if you go to the JCPS website and then go to employees, click on teacher backpack. It's one of those nice big rectangles right there. And then you can click on any grade. It's in the guiding resources across categories section, which is in the bottom right. And then once you're there, save the link, save that link to the PLC framework digital version. However, we will make sure that you know that there are going to be some updates. And so when those updates come out, you want to be sure to save the updated link. And we'll make sure that all principals, administrators, teachers, and instructional support staff know about that link and know how to access the updated PLC framework. Not huge updates, but you'll hear about that here in just a few minutes.
So now, how to use the PLC framework, like how is it used and how should you use it? And I want to thank you, Champion Rosenthal, for that shout out with my work with Solution Tree, but it all started with collaborative teams. And so they're the core PLC resource. So if you're looking at this actually should be the starting and ending point of each collaborative team meeting. So as an administrators that are going into those collaborative team meetings, you should make sure that they are using this. This is a map, like a roadmap for the PLC process and the success of them. And if you want to have high performing PLCs, then you will follow this roadmap. And again, as I said, it is also proven to improve increasing student achievement and school improvement. As the previous principal of Seneca, when we implemented collaborative teams there, that is when we went from the 5th to the 9th to the 12th to the 42nd percentile, because we embraced PLCs and we saw student achievement improve. So if you are looking with your team for the PLC process, I'm not sure what, and these things should guide the work of the collaborative teams. Each time that they're meeting, the 4 critical PLC questions: what is it that we want our students to know and be able to do? How do we know if students learned it? How do we respond when students don't learn? How do we respond when students do learn? These critical questions are very important. And so as building leaders, when you are looking and I know that every school has already created some type of form for your collaborative team to use, but if these 4 questions are not a part of that, I would highly encourage you to go back and make adjustments to that so that you can see that you are working toward this. These 4 critical questions have been outlined in the PLC process to align with our 6 systems and pillars, our racial equity, the MTSS, deeper learning. So you can show your team, and that is inside the PLC framework, that matrix that shows the alignment to these 4 questions. And now Champion Rosenthal will talk about the systematic process.
So here we listed the first 5 steps, and we're going to go through each of them briefly, just so you see how they are chunked. But I'll just reiterate what Ms. Dillard just said about these 4 critical PLC questions. That if the work that's happening in a collaborative team is not answering one of these questions, then it's time to take a step back, revisit the PLC framework, and recalibrate on what the work is. You should always be answering these 4 questions during our collaborative team time. And these steps align so well with the PLC questions, and hopefully you'll see that overlap as we go through. The first
team norms. That's just what we need to do to get ourselves started at the beginning of the year. So we know you all are planning your re-entrance to the PLCs and collaborative teams, even in this virtual world. And this is still what the steps of the PLC process would be. As a former principal, as principal at Hawthorne Elementary, we followed these steps before we had them fully written out. But this is what we followed because this is the PLC model. So you create those team norms. There's resources right there in the PLC framework on how to do that. Step 2 is assess the current reality. And that's something that all of us as professionals should be doing. Where are we currently? Because how can we know what we need to do next if we don't know where we are right now? We use that key data to do number 3, which is to set long-term SMART goals. There's lots of great resources out there on how to write an appropriate SMART goal that's both measurable and attainable, realistic, timely, and specific. So we want to make sure that we are modeling that as administrators for our staff so that they are able to write really effective SMART goals that we can revisit all year long so we can see our progress being made. Step 4 is to identify and deconstruct essential standards. We have a new resource that Ms. Dillard will be sharing with you here in just a little bit around that step 4. And then step 5 is commit to a guaranteed and viable curriculum. This is a really important step just for the culture of your school and for the culture of your building for students and for families as well. That guaranteed and viable curriculum is what you're promising to give students by the end of a grade. And that should be so much a part of your school that you're sharing that with students and you're sharing that with families as well. And it just helps everybody be accountable and excited about the work that you're doing. And it also reminds everyone what the focus is all throughout the year, that we know what we've guaranteed, what we've committed to do in all of our classes for our students. And there can be constant check-ins to just make sure we're all on the same page with that.
And Champion Rosenthal, I just want to add one thing to that. And you mentioned that about the virtual environment. And this is really a great time for our schools to make sure that our families, that the parents know that we are guaranteeing a viable curriculum for them. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And thank you so much for mentioning that.
Great point. So then we get into steps 6 through 10. And this is the cycle that our collaborative teams will be following all year long. So those first steps, those steps 1 through 5, are really just to get things in the right place so that we have all that background work done so that we can do this meaningful work of this cycle. So step 6 is to set a short-term SMART goal. So that's based on that long-term SMART goal. And we've talked about this with our principal champions quite a bit, that there's such value in having these goals, because if you don't have a goal, you don't have something to look back on and then celebrate success. And, we work so hard as educators. We have the most amazing instructional staff in this district, and they are giving their all the time, day in and day out. It's so important to do this step 6, because if you don't do step 6, you can't do step 10, which is to reflect on the SMART goal and celebrate the amazing progress that's been made because of your hard work. So make sure that your teams don't skip this step 6 and have a system in place to collect their short-term SMART goals and a system in place to revisit them in step 10. So after you have that short-term SMART goal, it's step 7, collaboratively plan for teaching. And that's getting into the meat of the work. We've got our curriculum frameworks and our instructional frameworks. And step 8 is create the common formative assessment. So you know what you want students to learn, you know what your goal is, you've planned, and then you have that common formative assessment so that you then give the common formative assessment, you get back that student data, and then now we're at step 9 where you plan for intervention and enrichment. So those answer those questions that we saw early on. What do we do when students learn? What do we do when students don't learn? And then finally, there's step 10 where you reflect on that SMART goal. How do we do getting towards that SMART goal? That's that professional learning, and that's where we grow as educators to figure out what the next things are so that we can get closer to meeting our SMART goal, or we recognize what we did well, we document that so that we make sure we keep doing that important work. And then finally, there's strengthening the cycle, and that's step 11 with self-assessment and step 12 with meeting with an administrator. And so that's a key part of your work too. Of course, we know that our administrators are spending lots of times in PLC.
monitoring for those 4 questions and progress through those different steps, but having an intentional check-in to really talk about the progress, how the collaborative teams are going, what additional supports are needed. And that's also what step 11 is too. And there's some great resources in the PLC framework to help you self-assess and to have really effective meetings with administrators to keep the great work going.
So with the PLC framework, what's new? You heard Champion Rosenthal speak about this earlier. There are going to be some updates. And so several of these updates you heard about in the previous session. And I just want you all to know we didn't plan this, but how wonderful to see that we're all on the same page and to show how all of these things are connected. So we do have the standards deconstruction and unit planning. And so that is something, so if you weren't on the last one, you can see here that this here helps you to be able to take a bundle of standards and to be able to plan those all at once. And it goes through this, where the previous one was kind of where teachers may thought that standards should be taught in isolation, and that's not what we wanted. So very thankful for Suzanne and her team for creating this. So assessing the student learning, it talks about the standards. You can align all of your standards there. Success criteria for mastery of the standard, and there are some questions that you should be asking, and then breaking down a standard. So this is just another little preview if you missed the previous session with Susan and Suzanne. The assessment landscape page, so we have updated that. And if you'll click on that formative assessment one, so it is important for you to see how all of the work is connected. And when I was looking at these updates on this formative assessment, I'm not seeing.
Does it still just show this?
No, I can see it now. So I wanted you to see how that even with the assessment landscape right here, what is its purpose? It is connected to PLC Framework step number 8. So this here will show you the purpose of the Common Formative Assessment, and it goes along with step 8. So it's not something separate. It's something that works tangent together. How should a teacher use it? Well, it talks about within or between an instructional unit, teachers administer common and formative assessments. You just heard us talk about that. That is actually step number 9 in the PLC framework. And so I wanted to just show you, so teachers, counselors, administrators, just whoever is on here, that you could see the connection of these items that we are having for you to show all these resources, that they are connected, they're not separate. You heard them talk about the quality work protocol. That's going to be put in there as well. The TNTP assignment review protocols. And then within the TNTP assignment review protocol, then you have like ELA, you see that there's math, science, and social studies. So it is very, very important that you get your training on this and that you begin to look at these protocols to see about the assignments that your teachers are creating for our students. Again, we want to make sure that we are improving academics. Even though we don't have a state test, we still have an obligation to our students and our families to make sure that our kids are getting the most rigorous curriculum and assignment that they can get. And these tools here are those tools that are going to help you do that. So we are working to link these tools into the PLC framework and update it. We've got to change some of the language in there. I thought that would be pretty simple and easy to do, but it's not. But anyway, it is what it is. We're going to get it done, and then we will send that out to everyone. And you'll have to go to the teacher backpack because that's where you'll be able to find find it. So I just wanted you to know that these things are going to be coming up soon to be in the PLC framework. We want to put that in there so that everything that you need, all the resources, that you can go to one spot and to be able to find them. And truly, I will say again, in closing this, it is so important for you to go back to revisit your PLCs, look at your documents that you have, and make sure that they are aligned with the PLC framework. That was Dr. Polio's vision, was to have something to help the entire district, because we knew that our collaborative teams were all over the place. And we have some excellent collaborative teams at all levels, elementary, middle, high, even in our special schools. We have some great teams, but we want an entire district to have great teams in every single building, ensuring that we are, number one, going through the teacher backpack, using all of those resources, and then using this PLC framework that encompasses the instructional frameworks and the curriculum framework as well. So we thank you for joining us today. We do have some additional tools for the administrators or AICs that you would like that when you're going in and you're monitoring these collaborative teams. So if you're interested in those, just reach out to us. We are always here to help, and we love sharing because we know that we believe in continuous improvement and learning by doing, and together we can do all things in JCPS. We just thank each and every one of you for joining us today. And again, you can't hear enough about PLCs, the collaborative teams, the teacher backpack, because that is what is going to move the needle for our district. So thank you all so much.
From Nicole Peters, asking about the best way to monitor data or protocol for PLC during NTI, especially during maybe a virtual PLC protocol. So to answer that, I'll answer the second question, and maybe Ms. Dillard, you can jump in with ways to monitor data. The protocol during NTI is the same as it is in person in terms of those steps. And we are very lucky to be bringing in MasteryConnect, which is a great resource for assessment, because if you don't have assessments, you can't get data. So there has to be an assessment system to start with in order to have the data. And then Ms. Dillard, what other suggestions do you have around data protocols during NTI, or even data collection during NTI?
So I would say, and we have some schools, so if I'm not sure who that person was, but if she will email me, I will send her a data protocol that some of our amazing champions have created to be able to use during the virtual setting. And so one of the things is that doing your Google Meet, so it's the same process that you would use as you had mentioned previously, but I do have a protocol to be able to help use, and it's going to be very important that when you are in your collaborative teams that you're able to pull up that protocol to be able to go by that protocol and to be able to look to see that you are getting the results that you wanted or you didn't want. And that's a good time for you then too to check in on that short-term SMART goal to see like where you are and how close you are to getting to your long-term goal. So I will send a document to the person. So if you email me and ask me for the data protocol, I'll share that with her.
It's a great question, though. I know we're all thinking about what needs to be modified and what needs to stay the same for NTI. So thanks for asking that question, because we do want to keep the integrity of the PLC process happening even during NTI. In fact, maybe even, I don't know if I'd say more so, but just as important, because we have a lot of work to do to make sure our kids are where they need to be academically, especially after a delay and some changes starting in March. So we got a lot of work to do. We need that PLC process and those great collaborative teams.
All right, guys. Well, welcome back. We appreciate you guys sticking with us there. We had that episode with Michelle Dillard and Jessica Rosenthal queued up and ready to rock for you. And next, we're excited to introduce to you guys a crew that's going to talk to you about NTI 2.0 grading procedure. We got Ms. Joe McKim and Maddie Shepard. I think I even see Alan joining us here. So we appreciate you guys being with us. How's it going this afternoon, everybody?
It's going pretty good.
Great. Well, there's Maddie, there's Joe. I think the whole crew's here. Thank you, guys. I think you're fielding some of my messages, seeing if you were available a little early. So everybody showed up, and boy, we're glad to see you. So Maddie, Joe, Alan, when you guys are ready, we'll turn it over to you and let you run. Thank you. Guys, if you're joining us in the chat, be sure to let us know what school you represent, who you are, and a little bit about yourself. If you got any questions, keep them going in there. We'll be watching that also from the Digital Learning Channel account. Be sure to join us on Twitter as well. And check out jcps.me/NTI, where you can find schedules and resources for NTI 2.0.
I think Maddie's the one that starts us off. She's the one that usually shares her screen and stuff, so I think we're waiting.
Oh, I got you.
Maddie,
can you hear us?
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm here, guys. What's up? Sorry
Hey,
about that. I had mute on and didn't realize it was on. But
No.
I'm here now, and we're excited for another showing of NTI Grading and Assessment Guidance 2.0.
Awesome. Well, thank you
I
for
heard
being
it's
with us.
gone so well, they wanted an extra 5 minutes with us.
That's right. That's right. You never have enough time.
So I'm going into screen share. We'll put our closed captions on, and then we'll go ahead and jump in. All right, test. Are there words at the top of the screen? Yes, there are. All right. We're in business, so we'll go ahead and jump in. If we did introductions and I missed it, sorry about that, but we have here Maddie Shepard, Joe McKim from Deeper Learning, and Alan Young. Alan, give your really big long title because I don't want to mess it up.
I'm just a district resource teacher and the project manager of the JCPS Educator Growth System. But I fraternize a lot with this Deeper Learning team.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of fraternization. So we like to start with our why on the Deeper Learning team. And we have a few whys. We've got some short-term and some long-term whys. On the short term, we're responding to feedback. There were surveys that were issued at the conclusion of NTI 1.0 and amongst role groups, amongst parents and kids and teachers, the data was pretty clear in indicating that we needed to do a better job of assessment and grading systems. We need to really tighten this up and strengthen it. And so when we were in NTI the first round, we had our met and not yet system that served us for the time being and did no harm to students when we had to switch into NTI mode literally overnight. But we can do better now. We've had some time to plan. We've had some time to involve some voices from various committees. And so we're responding to that feedback and offering some guidance on some ways to think about assessment and grading moving forward in NTI 2.0. But our other why is more long-term. What we're going to talk about today in terms of thinking about grading and assessment and rubrics and communicating out is definitely in line with where our district is headed, as indicated in our 3 pillars and our 6 systems. With our focus on backpack skills and competencies, kids being able to show learning in things that don't always live in our standards, in racial equity, and being able to provide every learner many opportunities to engage in rich, rigorous learning experiences, but also to demonstrate that learning in a way that makes sense for them. And then culture and climate, a collaborative culture and climate where kids have voices, where kids are co-designers of learning and assessment experiences alongside teachers. All of those things are things that align with what we're going to talk about today. And then our 6 systems as well. One system is specifically devoted to assessment, and these things guide where our district is headed. And so while we're responding to feedback and looking at what NTI 2.0 might look like. We're also looking beyond NTI, when eventually we'll be able to meet in person again, and hope that the guidance that we provide today stands long beyond when this virus is gone. Anything to add, teammates?
I think you did that introduction beautifully.
So keep in mind, we have some pieces of policy that live in our SPP&G, and we have some options that are, door openers, just some guidance we suggest. So just to put that out there for everyone. The assessment and grading guidance document that we'll be kind of working through and explaining today is linked here behind this bluish, tealish text. And so if you want to look at the document itself, that's how you might access that. And if this slide deck isn't already linked into the digital learning menu, I'm pretty sure it is, but you'll be able to follow along with us on this slide deck and access that document via this slide deck as well. So the first part of the assessment and grading recommendation and guidance document that we want to go over, again, is rooted in the why, the guiding purposes and principles around the design behind the guidance. So we just want to call attention to a few of the purposes and principles that guided the various subcommittees and voices that were involved in this process. So the first is that our purpose is rooted in being able to inform and improve instruction and learning experiences, not so much to rank or sort or compare learners. And I don't know about anyone else, but for me, this is a big shift. This is what grading was all about when I was a learner, was comparing myself to others, my class rank, where I stood in comparison to others. And it's really not about that. We hope to shift everyone to a place where assessment and grading is about the learner owning their data so that they can be a co-designer and co-developer of their pathway to mastery and to learning. It informs instruction so we can meet everyone's needs. Next is a focus on equity. It's being able to provide learners with a variety of rich assessments, performance assessments, demonstrations of learning, assessments where they themselves are learning experiences. And designing these assessments and looking at the data that they provide from a strength-based mindset rather than a deficit mindset. Again, which is a big shift for me personally. I know that when I was a learner and even learning to become a teacher in college, that we constantly talk about gaps and come from a gap-based mindset. But we want to shift that and talk about what learners can do, what standards they have mastered, what competencies they have shown through performance outcomes that they know and can do, and come from that lens when designing assessments and when looking at data. We also want to shift where we're assessing with rubrics. We've had a few sessions on the digital learning channel about rubric design, more specifically single point rubrics that are really simple in nature. We'll be talking about those later today, or earlier today, in fact. You can find those videos on the digital learning channel. But using rubrics really helps us to get very clear about what we're looking for in a task. And so we hope that we shift to designing rubrics that are standards-based rather than task-based, so that we're looking for the standard skills or competencies that the tasks we design are designed to elicit. And then we want to reframe demonstrations in terms of pacing, that learners showing that they have something and can do something is far more important than when they show it. If we think about it, I'll first acknowledge, reality that we all face, and that there are a lot of challenges with NTI, but there are a lot of things that we have freedom from that we don't necessarily have freedom from in our regular school environment. Things like pacing or time, we're no longer beholden to a 30-minute, 40-minute, 50-minute, or hour and a half block of time for class anymore. We're no longer beholden to these things that before constricted us. So thinking past those barriers and focusing on a learner being able to show something rather than when they show something. And then finally, shifting away from using zeros and start using incompletes and rubrics. And the reason is because zeros are more reflective of an absence of compliance or completion rather than a reflection of learning. And so we want to veer away from using zeros when reporting grades because it really doesn't tell us anything about the learning. It only tells us that a learner didn't do something. Anything to add, teammates?
Yeah, I'll jump in for a second. As I was listening to you talk, I was sitting here reflecting on my own time as a student and how many teachers and professors in college I had who graded on the curve, which meant exactly as you were saying, it was a competition in the class and everybody was going to fall within that bell curve, right? You would have the top 10%, the bottom 10%, and everybody in the middle. And it didn't matter if the highest score was a 70%, suddenly that 70% was the A and the top score, and everything fell below it. But if everyone scored between 90 and 100, then the person who got 90 suddenly had the failing grade because it was still on that curve because everything was normed against this idea of averages. And that's kind of what our letter grade system has done in our public school systems. And I think with this new NTI 2.0 grading guidance, we're really shifting away from that and saying instead of judging students against other students, let's let them decide where they are in reference to some mastery criteria that really does describe their learning and how they're moving those goals of learning our standards, learning our skills, learning our competencies. And that's really exciting. That's a great place for us to be to make the shift at a time when I think our students need it most, but knowing that it could be a vision that can carry us far into the future beyond this pandemic.
Yeah, and I was going to add, just to piggyback on that, the notion that this particular NTI way, where parents are much more likely to be seeing what's going on and wondering how their kids are comparing to each other, has been something that we've thought this was a really good time to sort of call that out and sort of show how we're really more concerned how they compare to how they're doing on a certain standard or certain criteria in a rubric versus each other, because it's really not a competition. And so this really gives that tightening up that we talked about, which would have led a lot of different parents see different teachers do different things in terms of grading and wondering what it is that got into that percentage or something. This allows us to be much more transparent and more united in terms of basically saying we're really here trying to have particular skills and standards and things our kids are trying to show, and we're not afraid to say what those are, and let's grade those on those criteria versus on a comparison with how fast a certain kid got it compared to the other. So this really does fit our short-term and long-term purposes.
Alan, why don't you take this one? This one's your favorite. I have decided.
Well, because of the particular time that we find ourselves in, where we know that student engagement is really an important part, but you'll see it talks about decreasing the emphasis on grading student engagement, because it is very difficult to assess in a fair way in these remote instructional settings, whether it's because of kids not having the same kinds of access, whether it's their bandwidth or the kinds of access to devices, or because some may have all kinds of competition at home in terms of being able to be on or not at the same time. And especially as we move to more synchronous this year, we felt it's going to be really hard to be able to engage, or excuse me, to grade student engagement. And we didn't think it's unimportant, but it was going to be hard to try to factor that in as a percentage. So our recommendation on the subcommittee of SPP&G that worked on this was that this area of engagement, we should talk to folks about or communicate through descriptive feedback, whether that's formative and informal all along the way, or even as it goes into report cards and things like that, using a comment or a description versus having it actually percentage-wise figure into the grade is something that we've recommended. And when you do that and take that, quote, 20% out that was there before, of course, to get to 100%, that does something to the rest of the percentages, doesn't it? So for us, we felt like, let's go ahead and just say, let's have the progress that kids make towards those standards and skills count as much as the actual mastery. We know that we want to never de-emphasize mastery, but we also want to make sure that we're giving, credit for how much progress a person makes as well. So we've kind of split that with a 50-50 percentage point way of having that go into the actual academic grade. I will say that, and this is to be preemptive because this is the third time that we've done this now, this is being brought before the school board. We're a little bit in a transitional time period right now, so we're putting this forward. And the Infinite Campus, I'm not for sure if it's actually been set up to kind of reflect this at this point in time. I know that there were some questions that came up earlier about how will we set our settings. And so I'll just ask that you hang sort of with your administrators, and somewhere along the way, I think we'll get that part figured out with regard to how to set the Infinite Campus percentages the right way if the district as a whole, or if your school, depending on how this all lands, decides to move in this direction as we've recommended.
And just to back up a teensy bit, when we talk about student engagement, in addition to recommending that we communicate that through descriptive feedback rather than, an official academic grade, we're also recommending that we reframe the way we think about student engagement.
Yes.
We're not necessarily talking about physical presence. Was a learner present during this Zoom or this Google Meet rather? But did a learner engage, and did they have academic engagement? And so shifting from physical presence to academic presence is how we'd like to think about student engagement when giving that descriptive feedback. So the next part of this document that we wanted to kind of go through with everyone is the grading continuum. And a few things that we wanted to highlight, which is that this continuum shows a progression of skill or competency rather than completion of a task. Again, I think one of our big messages is that we're shifting away from grading on task completion and shifting towards grading the standards, skills, or competencies that task is designed for learners to practice with or demonstrate. And so you'll see that progression here in just a second when we show the actual table. You'll also see a shift towards a mastery standards-based approach. We had, a standards-based grading session earlier today where we were joined by practitioners, Allison Vidito from Norton Elementary and Nicole Travis now at Mill Creek Elementary, talking about their journeys in this approach. And both practitioners at both schools have found, in my experience as well, that a standards-based approach really does improve the way that a teacher or a PLC plans instruction, looks and analyzes data and makes decisions from it. And it really empowers parents. And one of the big things that we've all been thinking about during this NTI 2.0 preparation period is thinking about how we support families in joining us in this work, because they're at home on the front lines where we can't be with kids now. We're kind of teaching from afar, but bringing parents in using standards-based grading approaches is a much more specific way to communicate what we're working on with our learning experiences and where learners are in that growth. And when they can understand that more deeply, rather than looking at a letter or a percentage grade that doesn't show them a whole lot, they're better able to engage with us and empowered to help their learner at home during this time of virtual partnership. So those are some big pieces that we wanted to highlight. Again, switching from task completion 2, communicating mastery of a skill, standard, or competency. We're shifting away from conventional grading, percentages, and letters towards mastery and standards-based. I will say that we completely acknowledge that we're kind of living in both worlds right now. We've got a foot in each, and we know that in the high school realm, GPAs matter and transcripts matter, because higher education isn't exactly where we are just yet. We're definitely leading them. However, we still offer this translation in order to continue living in both worlds, but we really hope that folks start with mastery and standards-based grading and translate only when necessary. And then we also wanted to shift away from using zeros, again, because zeros aren't really reflective of learning or growth in any way. Rather, they reflect absence of completion of a task or compliance. And so we want to shift away from using zeros and instead using incompletes. Anything to add, you guys?
There was a question in the chat, and I'll just put it in the air for everyone else to hear, and that was around district report cards, and will report cards be changing to include standards-based grading? And that was quite a bit of the discussion earlier in our standards-based grading session. And the answer to that at this time is no. The district does not have any definite plans to change the report card. However, schools that have been on this standards-based grading journey for a bit have started to create addendums or extra inserts to go along with the report card that does share with parents that standards-based progress. So they're actually getting more specific information about where their kids are in their learning journey. So for example, instead of getting a B in English, they're getting the B, they may be getting the B in English on their report card, but they're also getting a paper that says, Maddie is doing really well with expanding her vocabulary, but she's still struggling with comprehension when she puts those words together in a sentence. So that's much more meaningful to a parent than just a B in English.
I also just wanted to pick up on what you had said earlier, Maddie, with regard to the partnering possibilities with this, both with our students, most importantly, but also with the parents. When now a person gets a grade or a percentage, people don't know why that was. And they often feel much more passive. You'll even hear students say, my teacher gave me a B or something like that. And this allows us to actually start to talk about how it is particular criterion that you're either showing or not showing is why you've gotten to a certain level of mastery that we want to communicate out to you. And it allows students to be the partners then in terms of realizing they have something and it's not just being given a grade, they are really having to demonstrate something. And it gives us a tool by which to talk with parents about how they can help and support specifically on some of the different skills or standards and also get rid of kind of demystify, what was it, the reason my kid got a B and your kid got an A and all that kind of competitive talk. So I hope that when we actually move forward and take a look at the next slide, that people will focus more on the performance descriptions in standards-based grading, which even if you are conventionally grading, talk about where kids are in the standards or skills before you translate it to some kind of standards-based mark or letter grade or percentage anyway.
So that's a great segue, Alan. Here are the continuums. Like Alan said, we hope that folks will start with standards-based grading and get really clear with their PLCs around what the performance descriptors are for mastery for whatever standard or skill or competency that you're working on at that time, and only translate to this more conventional grading scale when necessary. Like Alan said, we can provide learners and parents, a letter grade, but it is kind of mystifying. We don't know where that came from. But instead, we could use these performance descriptors in a standards-based scale and demystify that and get really clear on what the makeup of that B, A, C, D, whatever is, so that learners know exactly what standards we're talking about and where they are in their growth towards mastery of those standards.
I think that's a real equity thing as well, because when you don't know why you got what you got, you don't know what to do about it, right? But now, by being very clear about the criteria, then a person can keep working on and doing what they need to do, extra work and getting extra support to get to a particular level of mastery. So I think it really is a real leveler in so to speak as well.
Yeah, I would add also that sometimes we okay, just pause for a minute. I see myself in the reflection and whatever's behind Alan. It sort of freaked me out for a minute. So I would add that sometimes I know I have done this in my education career. Sometimes we think we're letting parents know what that letter grade means. When we sent home a weekly, I would do grade reports, right? And have to have them signed by parents as a high school English teacher. And so I would think that because I had a list of all of those assignments and they could see where the zeros were or where they only got half the points or whatever, that was enough for a parent to go, oh, you're not doing what you should. You need to get better, and would assist me in some way. But realistically, as I moved through my career, I learned that doesn't really mean anything to a parent. All it means is their child didn't turn something in, which is not at all the same as can they read something and understand it? Can they write something and communicate it? Can they express and transfer skills and knowledge in other contexts? That wasn't reflective of any of those printouts I was sending home to be signed. They didn't know what those assignments were. All they knew was they were turned in or not turned in, which isn't always very helpful in helping students progress where we need them to.
Well, and that's like, you said it like right there, Joe. It just lets parents know that their kids didn't do something, not that their kids didn't learn or did learn something. And so giving information based on tasks like Joe just described isn't really super helpful to anyone. But shifting to giving feedback to learners and to parents on specific standards and their growth towards mastery of those standards is a far better way to communicate and engage learners and parents as partners in this work.
It also takes away the notion that some kids get, well, my teacher just didn't like me, and that's how I got this grade or something like that. This is really very transparent. It says, no, this is how you performed on this particular standard skill with multiple different kinds of attempts to do it and multiple ways that you got to show it. And that's where things were. I just think it's much healthier in terms of the whole psychology of learning and how parents support learning, if we can have our students and our parents be full partners in knowing what it is we are expecting kids to do, which is not just to get things done, but to actually show growth on these particular competencies, standards, or skills.
Next, we had an emphasis on flexibility. We talked a little bit about the fact that we're free from some barriers that we normally feel while we're in person. And we have a lot of flexibility in being free from those things. And so emphasis on flexibility was one of the other guiding principles of this guidance. And we wanted to, again, renew our focus on the fact that showing a competency rather than when a learner shows that competency is more important.
Right, Maddie. And this aligns perfectly with our JCPS vision and our 3 pillars and 6 systems, where we really emphasize personalized learning for students. And that is, we're adjusting as educators those dials for path and pace and place and time for our students based on who they are and where they are in their readiness and in their journey. So that might mean that for some students, the pace dial is turned up to super fast because they're able to move through things more quickly. These are our students that during NTI don't wait until Friday to get all of their work completed, and including that demonstration of learning. They may finish it on Monday night or Tuesday, and that's okay for them to do that and to move on to what comes next. But there are other students that, whether it's based on their current home setting, which we don't know what that might be right now, or if it's based on their ability or their attention to being able to sit in front of a computer for a very limited amount of time each day, or in a chunk of time, may need that pace dial turned way down and need a little more time to get there. So it's just important that as we think about this flexibility with grading and with assessment, that also includes how we design our learning and the instruction for students over this NTI period, as well as when we get back in our classrooms.
And when we get back in our classrooms, I was going to say one of the powerful things, and it can happen in NTI as well, is you can imagine the kind of dialogue and conversations and power that you can get when students can help each other in terms of talking about these criteria and be able to show and demonstrate, because they know it's not a big competition, that they each can do that. And I also wanted to mention that we had something that came out this morning in this morning's episode, where trying to tell the difference between meeting that standard and being above standards. One of the persons in the chat mentioned about being able to not just demonstrate the standard, but being able to teach it to someone else might be a kind of good way of saying how not only do you do the standards and meet it, but you clearly maybe have gone beyond. So I just sort of want to throw that out. I thought that was an interesting part about how do we tell if they're above standards in terms of what they've demonstrated.
So there are a few things that we just wanted to highlight as consistent practices. The first bullet is in reference to our bargaining contract with the district, and this hasn't changed. So these minimums here are still in effect. We also wanted to call attention to some other consistent practices, like giving descriptive feedback to peers or to learners from peers and educators, so that learners have access to feedback from one another, so they can start to see one another as learning resources from educators as well. Again, there was that really clear correlation between feelings of success and having access to a lot of feedback. We also want to make sure that we're being equitable in the opportunities that we offer learners to show learning, that learners have agency in determining when they're ready to show learning and how they show learning. We also want to make sure that we're reporting on a learner's progress and growth rather than completion of tasks. I know we've hit really hard on this point throughout this session today, but we really want to veer away from communicating a grade that really is supposed to reflect learning based on compliance or completion, and really move towards a place where we are communicating information on growth towards mastery of standards and learning. And in our standards-based grading session earlier, we showed a progression where we saw a swath of a teacher's grade book where she had entered a learner's progress in a standard over time. And the final grade reflected was the most recent grade from her assessments, not an average over time. If she had averaged that together, it would not have shown or been accurate in showing where a learner was at that time. It would have been an amalgam of the learner's journey. And that, again, isn't really an accurate reflection of where the learner is at that time. So we wanted to kind of stress consistently getting away from mathematical averages and reporting a learner's mastery at that point in time. We have lots of support for you. We know that this is, kind of a mind-blowing thing for a lot of people, and that's okay. We're all in different places. And so we offer standards-based grading sessions. We had one earlier today. There might be some of those in our future, but I know that the ones that are on the digital learning channel prior will be recorded and posted as soon as our friends in IT3 have a chance to put filters on and make us all look better. Just kidding, but to edit those and make those ready to go out on the YouTubes.
Can I get that at home?
Well, fine, then we won't put any of the filters on for you.
I'm kidding.
I don't know how either of these two females could look any better.
Oh, Alan in to save the day. Absolutely, sir.
We've taught him well. We've also got some sessions on descriptive feedback, rubric and assessment design. All of the resources and links to those, as well as performance assessment, are linked in the digital learning channels menu. So you'll be able to access those resources in addition to the videos. Our district has also purchased access to MasteryConnect, which we should be rolling out really soon. And that is a tool to help teachers make this shift. Everyone who I've talked to that's used it has sung its praises to the high heavens, and we're really excited for everyone to have access to this tool. There were some sessions earlier today, just some overviews and introductions of MasteryConnect. And then finally, I'd offer you the deeper learning team. We're here to help. If you want to talk about the grading and assessment guidance or any of the subjects you see here on your screen, we're happy to do that. We are education nerds and really like talking about standards-based grading and rubrics and performance assessment, and we'd love to help you in your journey. So don't be a stranger, and feel free to reach out.
Awesome. And see there, you were worried about that extra 5 minutes. You guys did perfect.
The more time you give us to talk, the more we will take.
We can fill it up.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you guys are fantastic as always. So it was great to see you just on a personal level, even though we can't be together. But thank you again for joining us on the channel too. So.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend, guys. And to those of you who are joining us on the Digital Learning Channel live today, I would have to say that's a wrap, folks. So please check the schedule next week. We've got another lineup coming in strong for you. Go to jcps.me/NTI, and there you can find a link to the schedule. You can see what presenters, what topics will be covered. Again, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get updates when we upload videos. So we break these up, as Maddie mentioned, and we'll upload them into the playlist for you. We also gives you notifications when we go live, and it helps, filter out some of those cat videos that you get. It gives you more educationally focused, content. So not that we're judging, but just, subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us today throughout the technical difficulties, ups and downs. We had a blast, and we look forward to seeing you Monday morning. Have a good weekend, guys.